Germany of Iron and Blood. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 251. Big win. We can lose this naval battle. However, the British Empire cannot lose this war. After Lieutenant General David Beatty figured this out, he immediately issued an order to retreat. Although, in this battle, they have lost many battleships. However, it is better to be able to escape a few ships than to lose them all. At least, if these few battle cruisers of theirs want to retreat wholeheartedly, the German Navy will not be so easy to catch them. However, the 3 Iron Duke class battleships on the other battlefield may not be able to escape. Lieutenant General David Beatty had no choice but to let them hold back the German Navy in an attitude of waste utilization, creating opportunities for the evacuation of other warships. After the order was issued, the remaining 5 battle cruisers of the British Navy immediately began to turn around and then began to accelerate and sail south quickly. The behavior of the British surprised the German Navy. Why did the British run away after fighting? What's going on? What are they going to do? Lieutenant General Hipper was a little dazed. Damn it, are they trying to escape? Lieutenant General Spelly cursed. Escape? They have already lost so many capital ships. Is there any point in escaping now? Hipper frowned. Indeed, in this battle, the British Navy suffered a lot of losses. Of the 4 King George V class battleships, 3 were sunk and 1 was severely damaged. Of the 9 battle cruisers, 3 were sunk and 1 was severely damaged. In addition, 1 of the 4 Iron Duke class battleships has been sunk, and the remaining 3 seem to be unable to escape. With such a huge loss, why do they still think about retreating? Is there any fraud in this, or the British have another battleship coming? So, they want to lure us to go south and throw ourselves into the trap? Lieutenant General Hipper asked. It is indeed possible, but I don't think it is very likely. This time, the British have dispatched 9 battle cruisers and 8 battleships. This is already all the warships that the British can deploy. If they deploy again for other warships, unless they don't want to continue to block the North Sea, it is estimated that the British were frightened by the huge losses and dare not fight anymore. Lieutenant General Spee said. Lieutenant General Hipper nodded, agreeing with Lieutenant General Hipper's point of view. Then shall we pursue it? Seeing the 5 British battle cruisers slip away like this, Lieutenant General Hipper was a little unwilling. Forget it, the British are determined to escape, and we can't catch up. Lieutenant General Spee shook his head. Although the speed of the 2 sides is equal, it is almost impossible to intercept the escaped British. Let's go help General Scheer and get rid of the 3 remaining British Iron Duke class battleships earlier. Lieutenant General Spee said. The German Navy's breaking fleet immediately rushed to join Admiral Reinhard Scheer, preparing to eat the remaining 3 Iron Duke battleships of the British Navy. In this case, in this naval battle, they sank 7 battleships and 3 battle cruisers of the British Navy. This kind of victory is already very fruitful. On the battleship Iron Duke, Rear Admiral Robertson was scolding. Damn it, that coward Betty, he actually abandoned us and ran away alone. He should be sent to a court-martial for his behavior. Major General Robertson asked Lieutenant General David Beatty to stop him and drag the Germans back. Order, very resistant. In his opinion, Lieutenant General David Beatty clearly meant to escape by himself and let him die. But what choice does he have but to carry out his orders? Even if you want to run, you can't run. How can a battleship with a maximum speed of only 21.25 knots and a scarred battleship outrun the German battle cruiser? So, even if he didn't want to stay, there was nothing he could do. Apart from scolding Lieutenant General David Beatty, there was no other way. Of course, he could also choose to surrender to the Germans. However, this is undoubtedly trampling on the honor of the Royal Navy for hundreds of years. If he dared to do that, his family would not be able to survive in England. Therefore, Major General Robertson has no other choice but to fight to the end. At most, they were captured by the Germans after the battleship sank. Almost at the same time, Admiral Reinhard Scheer also received reports from Lieutenant General Hipper and Lieutenant General Spee and learned that the British battle cruiser had escaped. It's a pity. It would be great if the British fought to the end. In that case, we can also eat up their remaining battle cruisers. Admiral Reinhard Scheer take a breath. As the commander of the German Navy's High Seas Fleet, he certainly hopes that the German Navy can sink more British warships in this battle. In that case, in future naval battles, the German Navy will have a greater advantage. The ships continue to shoot and get rid of the remaining 3 battleships of the British. Admiral Reinhard Scheer ordered. Since the British battle cruiser has run away, the remaining 3 Iron Duke battleships cannot be let go. If they are eaten, it will also be a huge blow to the British Navy. Knowing that they must die, the remaining 3 Iron Duke battleships of the British Navy also performed very bravely. They were still firing desperately in the face of a strong enemy. The reason why the British Royal Navy has been able to dominate the world's oceans for hundreds of years is not only the possession of powerful warships, but also the desperate fighting of these naval officers and soldiers. However, the efforts of these Royal Navy officers and soldiers are still meaningless, because the disparity in strength between the two sides is really too great. Especially after the 5 battle cruisers of the German Navy's breaking fleet also arrived and joined the siege of them. The battleship Benbow was the first to be sunk, and more than 10 minutes later, the battleship Marlborough followed in his footsteps. The battleship Iron Duke was the last to be sunk. Rear Admiral Robertson and other British Navy generals did not choose to sink with the ship, but boarded the lifeboat before the battleship sank, and were subsequently captured by the German Navy. This naval battle ended with a complete victory for the German Navy. At the cost of 1 battle cruiser, the German Navy sank 7 British battleships, 3 battle cruisers, and damaged 1 battleship and 1 battle cruiser. Chapter 252, Underwater Crisis. While the British Navy and the German Navy were desperately fighting a war, the British merchant ship was sailing south. For these large, slow, and fragile merchant ships, if they are involved in a naval battle, they will die. Those huge battleships only need 1 shot to deal with these merchant ships. So, after the war started, the bait mission of these merchant ships was completed. Next, they should think about how to escape back to the British mainland safely. The materials loaded on these merchant ships are also war materials that Britain urgently needs. If it can be preserved, that is naturally the best. After the war broke out, Britain's war machine was fully operational, and the daily consumption of supplies was an astronomical figure. The resources in the UK alone are simply not enough to support the high-speed operation of the war machine. Therefore, they can only collect various resources from the colony. In order to ensure the safety of these merchant ships, the British Navy deliberately left 6 destroyers to provide them with protection. Of course, these protections are more of a mere formality. If the battle cruisers of the German Navy catch up, even if these destroyers are all tied together, they will not be able to resist it. Even if their torpedoes can pose a fatal threat to the battle cruisers of the German Navy, they must be able to hit the target. These 6 destroyers of the British Navy belong to the Laffrey class destroyer, which is a new first-class destroyer built by the British Navy before the outbreak of the war. It has a displacement of 1,000 tons and a maximum speed of 29 knots. Cannon and twin 533mm torpedo tubes. In order to anti-submarine, these destroyers are also equipped with depth charges. Especially after the submarines of the German Navy began to ravage the Atlantic Ocean, depth charges have become standard equipment for these destroyers of the British Navy. The destroyer Laffrey is the flagship of this small fleet, commanded by Major Edward. Sir, it has been confirmed that the Germans did not send warships to catch up. Captain Martin, the builder of the destroyer Laffrey, reported. That's good. The attention of the Germans is on the main fleet of the Royal Navy, and they will not pay attention to us for the time being, unless they can defeat the Royal Navy. Otherwise, they will not come to chase us. Major Edward breathed a of relief. He knew that with only the 6 destroyers in his hands, once he encountered the capital ship of the German Navy, he would be dead. These destroyers with a displacement of only 1,000 tons are not enough to fit those huge warships between their teeth. Sir, the Germans shouldn't defeat us, right? Captain Martin said. As a young officer of the Royal Navy, he has great confidence in the Royal Navy, and believes that the Royal Navy will definitely be able to defeat the enemy. Of course, we will not be defeated. This time, the Royal Navy set a trap for the Germans. But the stupid Germans were really fooled. Although their warships are very powerful, once they encounter the Royal Navies the siege of the main fleet is also inevitable, Major Edward said with a smile. Captain Martin seemed relieved. It's just that they will soon know that they think everything is too optimistic. The Royal Navy, which has assembled the main force, will suffer heavy losses in this battle, and the foundation of the Royal Navy will be hurt. Of course, for these small officers, these are simply not something they can mix. Okay, Captain Martin, don't worry about that. Now our task is to safely *** these merchant ships back to the UK. The weapons loaded on these merchant ships can be strengthened by rifles and cannons, and even battleships. Come and teach those damned Germans a lesson, Major Edward said. Yes, sir. Captain Martin nodded. Less than 20 kilometers away from the British fleet, a periscope protruded from the sea. After finding that there was no situation around, a submarine emerged from the sea, like a big fish floating on the sea. Same. The cover of the boat was opened, and Enitz, who was dressed in a black submarine uniform, got out of it, and several submarine soldiers followed behind him. Several people started to get busy, starting the diesel engine, to charge the submarine's battery. By the way, they also use this time to smoke a cigarette and relax. Because the interior space of the submarine is small and the air is turbid, smoking is absolutely not allowed inside. Sir, where are we now? Are we far from the battlefield? A submariner asked. It shouldn't be far from the battlefield. However, whether we can catch up depends on God's will, Dönitz said. Originally, Dönitz and his U-039 submarine were hunting and killing British merchant ships in the waters of Western England. But after receiving the order, he and more than a dozen other submarines sailed into the vast Atlantic Ocean. The task they received was to find the fleet of the British Navy, and if possible, launch an attack and sink those capital ships. This is also a set of backup plans prepared by the German Navy Ministry. If your own battlecruiser formation fails to defeat the British Navy, these submarines may be able to make up for it. Of course, these are worst case scenario tactics. Perhaps those battlecruisers have already dealt with the British, and there is no need for us to work hard to come here, an officer said. I hope. But if those battlecruisers can leave us a sip of soup, that would be good. Dönitz's eyes lit up. He commanded the U-039 submarine. Although he had sunk many British merchant ships, he had never sunk a capital ship, which he regarded as a pity. It would be great if this regret can be made up for. Half an hour later, the diesel engine had fully charged the submarine's batteries. Dönitz also smoked his last cigarette. When he was about to get into the submarine, he suddenly found a lot of masts on the sea to the north. If there is a situation, dive immediately, Dönitz ordered. Submarine U-039 immediately dived in an emergency, and in just 2 minutes, it dived to a depth of 50 meters. Soon, they heard a lot of noise passing over the submarine. It's a merchant ship, not a large warship, and maybe some destroyers, a submariner said. It seems that we didn't encounter the main fleet of the British, but we did encounter their merchant fleet. A smile appeared on Dönitz's face. Dönitz felt a little regretful that he had not been able to meet the main fleet of the British Navy. However, it would be quite good if the British merchant fleet could be eliminated. Chapter 253, Feast of Submarines. The U-039 submarine gradually surfaced after the British fleet passed overhead. Quickly, immediately send a telegram to other submarines to report the news of the British fleet. This time, we will kill all of these British fleets, Dönitz ordered. Yes, sir. The communication soldier immediately went to send a telegram. Immediately, the U-309 submarine began to chase the British fleet going south with all its strength. Because the speed of merchant ships is generally slower, far lower than the speed of submarines on the sea, the U-039 submarine can completely keep up with the British fleet. In addition, they continuously communicated the position of the British fleet to other submarines through telegrams, allowing them to adjust their course and intercept them. A large net composed of the submarine force of the German Navy is enveloping the British fleet. The British, on the other hand, don't even know about it. Submarine hunting often requires patience. For a suitable attack position, they sometimes even need to spend a whole day waiting. This time, organizing other submarines to form a pack of wolves, To attack the British fleet requires close cooperation between the submarines. Otherwise, if something goes wrong, it is possible to make their plan fail. It was not until the afternoon that the submarine force of the German Navy completed its deployment, and a total of 9 submarines participated in this operation. Except for the U-039 submarine which followed the British fleet, the remaining 8 submarines formed an encirclement from the front, left and right of the British fleet. At 3:45 p.m., submarine U-048 aimed at a British merchant ship and fired a torpedo 533mm heavy torpedo, less than 500 meters away from the merchant ship, quickly rushed towards the merchant ship. The people on the merchant ship didn't notice it at all, as if they didn't realize that the crisis had come to them. Boom. A huge explosion sounded on the side of the merchant ship. The flames shot up into the sky, and the huge merchant ship shook violently. The entire side of the ship seemed to have been bitten off by a monster. The defense of the merchant ship was already very bad. Under the explosion of the high explosives of the torpedo, the merchant ship was directly torn apart. The seawater poured into the merchant ship frantically, and the sinking of the merchant ship was irreversible. What's going on? When the merchant ship was attacked, both Major Edward and Captain Martin were startled, and they looked at the merchant ship in front of the formation with binoculars. Is it an enemy attack? Or was there an accident? Captain Martin asked. Major Edward's face has become ugly. Get ready to fight. I think we are in trouble. Damn the German submarine. We are being targeted by them. At this time, several more merchant ships were hit. This is an attack from a submarine ambushing in the surrounding area. For the submarine force of the German Navy, such a large British fleet is like a feast for them to enjoy. Everyone hopes to add some to their sinking numbers. It's not just a submarine. How many submarines did the **** Germans hit in this sea area? Major Edward couldn't help but exclaimed. If they only encounter a German submarine, they can also use destroyers to siege, sink it, and drive it away, no matter how bad it is. But now there is not just one submarine, but several submarines. Therefore, this time the problem may be troublesome. Order the destroyer to launch an attack, find out those German submarines, and sink them. They must never be allowed to attack our merchant ships again. Major Edward ordered. The destroyer that provided the **** for the fleet, like a ferocious hound, rushed to the place where the merchant ships were hit. It's just that the German submarine has launched a torpedo and hid in the water again, waiting for the next opportunity to attack. The entire fleet is already in chaos. After being attacked by German submarines, these British merchant ships fled in all directions like frightened sheep. In the panic, some merchant ships even collided with each other. After the hull was smashed, they sank directly into the sea. The whole scene became extremely chaotic. Boom. 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 The destroyers of the British Navy also continuously dropped depth charges into the sea in an attempt to blow up the German submarines hiding in the sea. However, they had little success. Submarines don't stay still underwater. Although the submerged speed of the current submarine is still very slow, it is not something that a destroyer without sonar can catch. Destroyers want to sink submarines, more can only rely on luck. A periscope rose from the sea, vigilantly observed the surrounding area, and after no danger was found, it rose to the height of the torpedo launch. The merchant ship ahead is 600 meters away from us. The number 1 launch tube is ready. Launch. Done, it's ordered. Boom. A 533mm torpedo shot out of the torpedo tube and quickly shot towards the British merchant ship ahead. Soon, the torpedo lightly kissed the side of the merchant ship. Through the periscope, Dunitz clearly saw that the submarine was blown to pieces during the explosion. Quick, dive. The British destroyer is here. After seeing a destroyer rushing towards them aggressively, Dunitz gave an emergency dive order. The water tank of the submarine began to fill with water, and it quickly dived into the sea. When they dived to more than 50 meters underwater, and began to submerge at a speed of 5 knots, the depth charges of the British Navy also fell into the sea. Boom. Boom. A dull explosion sounded, and the shock wave slapped on the hull of the submarine, making a crackling sound. Even the submarine began to shake under the action of the water waves. After the destroyer of the British Navy launched an attack, it turned around and left after not finding the target. Dennett's and the others breathed a sigh of relief. Submarine is a weapon with strong concealment. But at the same time, once encountered an attack, it is difficult to fight back, and can only escape the enemy's attack by dodging. The melee ended after more than half an hour, and the submarines of the German Navy withdrew one after another. Although not all British merchant ships on the sea were sunk, these German submarines had no torpedoes, and had to evacuate. The British destroyers on the sea searched for them like mad dogs, making it impossible for them to surface and attack those merchant ships with artillery. They are already very satisfied with being able to kill so many merchant ships. Better than keep going and get sunk by British destroyers. Chapter 254. Unacceptable result. United Kingdom, Admiralty. After the outbreak of the war, it became extremely busy here. As the most powerful and important force of the British Empire, the Royal Navy has always been regarded as the #1 force to protect the interests of the Empire. Hundreds of years of world hegemony have also made people feel that both the British Empire and the Royal Navy are invincible. However, what the outside world does not know is that the current Ministry of the Navy is anxiously waiting. A naval battle going on today is really important to the British Empire. If it fails, it will put Britain in a serious crisis. In the office of the Secretary of the Navy Churchill was pacing back and forth. Sitting in front of him was Admiral John Jellicoe, commander of the Grand Fleet. He too had come back from Scapa Flow. Of course, Churchill called Admiral John Jellicoe back just in case. If Lieutenant General David Beatty did not succeed this time, they would have to think of other ways to deal with the Germans. Is there no news from General David Beatty? Churchill asked. Your Excellency, there is no news yet, the secretary replied. Churchill nodded and said no more. No news. Perhaps the best news. It was better than receiving news of defeat. General John Jellicoe knew what Churchill was worried about. In fact, he was equally worried. This time, the Royal Navy can be said to have put most of the cutting-edge battleships into this plan. If there is still no way to succeed, then they really have nothing to do with the German Navy. Your Excellency, General David Beatty will definitely be able to win this time. After all, we dispatched 9 battle cruisers and 8 battleships. With this kind of combat power, unless the main force of the Germans comes out in full force. Otherwise, definitely not our opponent. Admiral John Jellicoe said. Well, but, General Jellicoe, we often have to prepare for the worst. What I want to say is that if General Beatty doesn't succeed this time. So, what should we do? Asked Churchill. Admiral John Jellicoe was silent for a while, and after 2 minutes, he said, Your Excellency, if General Beatty and the others fail this time, then we may have to think of other ways to deal with the German fleet. Regardless, no matter what, we must persist until the first half of next year, and wait until our Queen Elizabeth-class battleships and Revenge-class battleships are all in service, before fighting the Germans. In that case, our chances of winning will be better. Well, it makes sense. Churchill nodded. However, if we have no way to deal with the German fleet, how can we ensure the smooth flow of our sea transportation lines? The Germans will never give up this good opportunity to check and balance us. Churchill frowned. The sea transportation line is equivalent to the lifeline of the United Kingdom. Once the lifeline is cut off, can the UK still hold on? Even thinking about it is unlikely. Your Excellency, we have already thought about this issue. Our merchant ships can fly the flag of a neutral country, such as the flag of the United States. In this case, the Germans should not dare to launch an attack, right? The United States is a big country, and the Germans absolutely have no courage at this time. The United States will be provoked. In addition, we can order some military supplies from the United States and let the Americans send ships to us. In this way, we can also avoid being attacked by the Germans. Just hold on to our new cutting-edge battleships next year, serve. At that time, we will be able to engage in a decisive battle with the Germans. Once we win, all crises will naturally be lifted. If we fail, Admiral John Jellicoe did not continue. However, his meaning is already obvious. Churchill also knew that, if the Royal Navy failed in the decisive battle, then Britain would be completely finished. Without the Royal Navy, to maintain Britain's sea power, it will quickly decline from a world hegemon to a second-rate country. This is absolutely unacceptable to the British government and the entire British people. May God bless General David Beatty. I hope he can bring us a victory. Churchill murmured. As the Lord of the Navy of the British Empire, in charge of the most powerful navy in the world, he never thought that such a day would come. You must know that Britain has always relied on its strong naval power to bully other countries. But now, they have been forced into such a dangerous situation by Germany, which is really unacceptable. Report. At this moment, a staff officer knocked on the door and walked in. Churchill and General John Jellicoe both stood up from the sofa immediately. They all knew that there must be news from Lieutenant General David Beatty. How's the situation? Churchill asked. Did we win? Admiral John Jellicoe asked. Report. General David Beatty's telegram claims that we have been defeated. The staff officers said. What? How could we lose? Churchill exclaimed, as if his bones had been removed. He fell down on the sofa, as if he had lost all energy. Impossible. It's absolutely impossible. We assembled such a powerful fleet. How could General David Beatty lose? There must be something wrong. Admiral John Jellicoe responded to this result. Is obviously unacceptable. General, we have repeatedly confirmed to General David Beatty. They have indeed been defeated and are retreating. The staff officer said bravely. General John Jellicoe was taken aback for a moment. Although he was very unwilling, he knew that this might be the truth. David, how was General Beatty defeated? John. General Jellicoe asked. General, the detailed battle process is on the telegram. You should read it yourself. The officer said. General John Jellicoe had to take the telegram, waved his hand, and let the officer leave. He also knew that it was obviously their gaffe. Just now that frightened the officer. Admiral John Jellicoe began to read the telegrams, but his complexion became more and more unsightly, and finally turned black, as if it was the bottom of a pot. General Jellicoe, David, did General Beatty really fail? Churchill asked. Yes, Your Excellency, General David Beatty did fail. The despicable Germans already knew that this was a trap set by us. Therefore, they also made preparations, which led to General David Beatty's failure. Admiral John Jellicoe gritted his teeth and said. Chapter 255, Panicked British. Churchill was silent, although he had long thought that the plan this time might not go so smoothly, or might fail. However, when the news of the failure came, it still made him a little unacceptable. Of course, Churchill was not a person who could not accept reality. As the Minister of the Navy, he must be responsible for the British Empire. No matter how difficult it is, he must lead the Royal Navy to win the war. David, how did General Beatty fail? Was it a big loss? Churchill asked. Your Excellency, the Germans have already made preparations. In addition to the 6 battle cruisers and their breakaway fleet, they also dispatched 3 more powerful battle cruisers. Admiral John Jellicoe said. Churchill frowned. We dispatched 17 warships. Even if the Germans added 3 more battle cruisers, they wouldn't be defeated by them. Your Excellency, the 3 German battle cruisers are all powerful battle cruisers equipped with 380mm main guns. It is beyond our expectations. The Germans will be equipped with 380mm main guns before us battleship. And this time, it gave us a hard blow. Admiral John Jellicoe gritted his teeth and said. Those guys in the intelligence department, I will settle accounts with them. Churchill cursed. Subsequently, Admiral John Jellicoe introduced the history of the naval battle to Churchill. When he learned that the British Navy lost 7 battleships and 3 battle cruisers, another battleship and 1 battle cruiser were severely damaged, and only 5 battle cruisers were still strong, Churchill no longer knew what to say. What's the point? Lieutenant General David Beatty, this time is not just a failure, it can be described as a fiasco. Lost so many capital ships, especially all new capital ships. Even if the Royal Navy has a big business, it can't afford such a loss. It can be said that this has already hurt the Royal Navy. Damn, how could there be such a big loss? This will seriously damage the strength of the Royal Navy. If the Germans launch a decisive battle with us at this time, we simply cannot resist it. Churchill panicked. He even believes that, if only the number and combat effectiveness of cutting-edge warships are counted, the German Navy may have surpassed the British Navy and become the veritable number 1 in the world. This result made him panic. Your Excellency, the combat power of the Germans has indeed exceeded our expectations. Lieutenant General David Beatty mentioned more than once in the telegram that the German Navy's warships have very strong defenses and have been hit by us several times. But the armor was not penetrated, and our warships, because of their weak armor, are often seriously injured or even sunk once they are hit. Under such circumstances, we are very disadvantaged in naval battles, Admiral John Jellicoe explained. Actually, this problem was already exposed when the battlecruiser Lion was sunk. It's just that it hasn't been taken seriously. However, in this naval battle, this problem was once again exposed, and it is difficult not to be taken seriously. But the embarrassing thing is that these warships have already been built, so they can't go back to the shipyard for refitting to increase the thickness of the armor, right? In that case, it is completely unfeasible, and it will cause problems in the balance of all aspects of the battleship, which will affect the combat effectiveness, and even directly overturn it. I'm afraid it will be difficult to solve this problem. At most, we should pay attention to this problem in the subsequent construction of warships, Churchill said. John. Admiral Jellicoe nodded. So, General Jellicoe, we have lost so many capital ships. So, can the Royal Navy still fight the Germans? Will we still be able to defeat the Germans in the decisive battle in the future? Churchill asked. Your Excellency, the Germans are obviously hiding their strength. It seems that they should be serving with battleships equipped with 380mm main guns. This speed far exceeds ours. However, if the decisive battle is in our Queen Elizabeth, if we proceed after the Revenge class and Revenge class battleships are in service, we may not have no chance of winning. Of course, in view of the heavy losses of our capital ships now, I hope that the Navy can immediately start building a newer class of battleships, and with the latest start construction as quickly as possible, and strive to enter service within 1.5 years, Admiral John Jellicoe said. Churchill nodded. He also knew that the main force of the Royal Navy was severely damaged and needed to be supplemented urgently. Otherwise, the Royal Navy may not be able to win future decisive battles. I will report to Your Excellency the Prime Minister. However, the future warships of the Navy must avoid the problem of weak armor. These are the painful lessons that the Royal Navy paid for with blood and lives. Churchill sighed. If the Royal Navy can be given another chance, they will definitely not establish a shipbuilding idea that emphasizes firepower and speed and despises defense. Unfortunately, God will never give them such a chance. General Jellicoe, go and prepare the design materials for the cutting-edge warship. I'm going to see the Prime Minister, Churchill said. The Royal Navy has suffered such a disastrous defeat, and it is impossible to hide it. What's more, the Navy needs to build more capital ships, and it needs the support of the cabinet. Otherwise, where can it get funding? Yes, Your Excellency, Admiral John Jellicoe replied, then saluted and prepared to leave. At this time, a staff officer rushed in anxiously. Churchill and General John Jellicoe couldn't help but frowned. At the same time, they also had a bad premonition in their hearts. Could it be that there is any bad news coming? Report. The fleet sent a telegram. They were attacked by the German submarine force. More than 10 submarines participated in the attack on our fleet. The fleet suffered heavy losses. So far, 14 merchant ships have been silent already, the staff officer reported. Churchill and John Jellicoe admirals' faces were livid. What they did was a house leak, and it rained all night. That's it. The Royal Navy has lost so many capital ships, and it is time for them to build warships frantically to make up for the losses. The merchant ships have suffered serious losses again, which will make them even more scarce in war supplies, and even restrict their shipbuilding plans. Damn the Germans, they want to kill us. No matter what, I will not let the German conspiracy succeed, Churchill said through gritted teeth. It's just that, although he looks fierce, in his heart, he is already very panicked. Chapter 256. Do you want to lose? Downing Street, the Prime Minister's office, and the meeting room. The atmosphere is quite dignified. Prime Minister Asquith sat in his seat with a livid face and said nothing. The faces of other cabinet officials are also very ugly. Only the Secretary of the Navy Churchill stood and introduced the failure of this naval battle. So far, we have lost the battle cruisers Indefatigable, Australia, Indomitable, battleships Audacity, Centurion, Ajax, Iron Duke, Marlborough, Benbow and Emperor of India. In addition, the battlecruiser Indomitable and the battleship King George V suffered heavy damage and are expected to pass. It takes 3 months of repairs to restore combat effectiveness. Churchill introduced to everyone expresslessly. He didn't read the name of a battleship or battlecruiser, which made him feel like he was bleeding. These are the main battleships of the Royal Navy. After losing these warships, the Royal Navy may be in jeopardy. How did we lose so much? Prime Minister Asquith asked. This is also a common question among other cabinet members. Everyone thought it impossible for the Royal Navy to lose so much. This is definitely the biggest loss the Royal Navy has suffered over the years, Your Excellency. This issue is more responsible. There are mainly 2 reasons. On the one hand, the Germans have also prepared for our plan this time. They ambushed 3 battle cruisers equipped with 380mm main guns. It was the culprit that directly led to the annihilation of our 4 Iron Duke battleships. On the other hand, there was a fundamental problem with our shipbuilding thinking. Before, when we were building battleships, we paid attention to firepower and speed, despising defense. But in naval battles, this problem is fatal. Our main guns cannot penetrate the armor of German warships, so naturally we cannot severely damage or sink them. However, the German main guns, but it can easily penetrate the armor of our warships, causing our warships to be severely damaged or sunk. Therefore, in this naval battle, we will lose so badly. Churchill explained. How did this happen? Why didn't we notice these problems in advance? What do the intelligence agencies do? The Germans served warships equipped with 380mm main guns, but we were kept in the dark. Prime Minister Asquith furiously said. The head of the intelligence department bowed his head in shame, because the intelligence department's mistakes made the Royal Navy pay such a heavy loss. Obviously, he's done it. Next, I'm afraid that he will be directly dismissed by Prime Minister Asquith. The design problem of the battleship, why is it only now exposed? Are the previous arguments all for nothing? Prime Minister Asquith was very angry. You know, the battleships of the British Navy, whether they are battleships or battle cruisers, are all built according to the idea of emphasizing firepower and speed and despising defense. Doesn't this show that once these warships enter the battlefield, they will not be opponents of the Germans? Then how can we fight this battle? Just admit defeat to the Germans. Churchill didn't know how to answer for a while. The British Navy has established a shipbuilding idea that emphasizes firepower and speed and despises defense for a long time. It is almost impossible to pursue responsibility now. Your Excellency Churchill, this time we have lost so many battleships. Doesn't that mean that the Royal Navy is no longer able to defeat the Germans? Will we lose this decisive battle? Asked Sir Edward Grey, the Foreign Secretary. Other cabinet ministers also looked at Churchill, and everyone was thinking about this issue. The British Empire is the hegemon of the world, and their cabinet ministers are also people who hold great power. But if the Royal Navy loses this decisive battle, then the British Empire may have to give up its position as the world's hegemon. At that time, these people, let alone continue to be in power. I'm afraid those angry people will directly drive them out of power and tear them into pieces. Your Excellency Prime Minister, Your Excellencies, Ministers. I have to tell everyone. This time, the Royal Navy may really be in big trouble. In addition to the battlecruiser Lion that was lost before, we have already lost 11 ships. The capital ship is gone, and the Royal Navy is even bruised. If the Germans want to fight us at this time, we may really lose. Churchill said. As soon as Churchill finished speaking, the cabinet members began to discuss. Everyone's faces were very ugly, even full of frightened expressions. For such a result, everyone is obviously unacceptable. They don't want the Royal Navy to really lose. Once lost, it would be a fatal blow to the British Empire. Your Excellency Churchill, don't we still have the Queen Elizabeth class battleships and the Revenge class battleships that will be in service soon? Those are all powerful battleships equipped with 381mm main guns, and their combat effectiveness is definitely no longer that of the German battleships. Even then, would we all lose? Asked Lloyd George, Chancellor of the Exchequer. The Queen Elizabeth class battleships and the Revenge class battleships are indeed not weak, but they still have the disadvantage of being too weak in defense. What's more, even if we have these 10 battleships equipped with 381mm main guns, the Germans will certainly there are not less than this number of battleships equipped with 380mm main guns. In terms of the number of capital ships and combat effectiveness, we have been completely overtaken by the Germans. Churchill replied sadly, "My God. How is this possible? Is the Royal Navy going to lose future wars? The Royal Navy is number one in the world and the pillar of the British Empire. The Royal Navy must not lose. If the Royal Navy loses the war, what should we do? Can sea power be guaranteed? Can our vast colonies be defended? Lost sea power and overseas colonies, is the British Empire still the British Empire?" The ministers of the British cabinet all started talking, and they all thought of how serious the consequences would be if the Royal Navy lost the war. Such consequences are obviously not acceptable to them. Prime Minister Asquith's face turned even darker, as if he was the bottom of the pot. He felt that he was too unlucky. Why did a world war break out during his tenure, and Britain might lose? In that case, wouldn't he become the Prime Minister who ruined the hegemony of the British Empire? I'm afraid he will become a sinner through the ages. If possible, he wanted to quit immediately. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 257, Crazy Shipbuilding Plan. Your Excellency, since the Royal Navy may lose this war, I think it is better to contact the Germans immediately, sacrifice certain interests, and end this war. A cabinet minister suggested. This proposal has won the support of many cabinet ministers. In their view, the Royal Navy is the backbone of the British Empire. Now, even the Royal Navy can't beat the Germans, so it's better to negotiate peace as soon as possible. In this case, even if you will lose some benefits, you still haven't lost everything. Huh? Gentlemen, you seem so naive. How can it be possible to end the war now? The Germans have already taken the upper hand. Whether it is on land or at sea, they have the initiative. If they also win the next step, if so, they will be able to completely win this war. At that time, they will get everything they want. It is much more cost effective than negotiating with us. Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey said. Suddenly, those ministers stopped talking, and they also knew that it was indeed a bit whimsical to want to talk about peace now. If it were them, they would definitely not agree to peace talks at this time. The ambitions of the Germans are well known. They want to take advantage of this war to defeat us and become the world's hegemon. They will never give up until this goal is achieved. Minister of War Richard Haldane also said, "Okay, everyone. I don't think there is any need to argue about war or peace. If the British Empire doesn't want to lose its status as the world's hegemon and its vast overseas colonies, it has no choice but to continue the war." Asquith the Prime Minister said. "Yes, Your Excellency the Prime Minister." All the cabinet ministers replied, "Your Excellency, how do we win the war? If we lose the war, we will lose nothing." Lloyd George, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, asked, "Since the war is going to continue, it must find a way to win. What's the point of fighting if you're destined to lose?" Prime Minister Asquith did not answer immediately, but looked at Minister of the Navy Churchill. "Master of the Navy, what is the Royal Navy going to do next to win the war?" Prime Minister Asquith asked. "Your Excellency, the Royal Navy has lost a lot this time. However, our main force is still there. The Royal Navy needs to recover its strength, or even have a stronger strength, to be able to defeat the Germans. Next, we will urgently add a batch of warships. The construction plan is to complete the construction of these warships in the fastest time. This requires the support of the cabinet," Churchill said. Prime Minister Asquith nodded. "The Royal Navy has lost so many capital ships, so it is natural that more capital ships need to be built to make up for the loss. Of course, to speed up the construction progress, this also means that more funds will be spent. However, now they have no other choice. If they want to strengthen the strength of the Royal Navy and win this war, they must invest more funds. The Ministry of the Admiralty should submit the construction plan as soon as possible. Even if it is a waste of money, the cabinet will fully support you." No matter what, we must win this war this time. This will be the biggest crisis in the history of the British Empire, said Prime Minister Asquith. Yes, Your Excellency the Prime Minister. Churchill nodded, feeling very excited. Now that Prime Minister Asquith has made such a statement, it means that their huge shipbuilding plan will definitely be passed. In less than 2 years, the strength of the Royal Navy will be able to recover. If the war can be delayed until then, the Germans may not win. Everyone, now is the time when the British Empire is dying, and we can no longer have any illusions about the Germans. There is only one way for the British Empire to defend its own interests, and that is war. Only by defeating the Germans can it can ensure the supremacy of the empire. Therefore, I hope that you can unite and do your best to ensure that the British Empire wins this war instead of dragging its feet. Prime Minister Asquith said. Yes, Your Excellency the Prime Minister. Everyone replied. However, I'm afraid that only they themselves know what they think in their hearts. After all, when the country is facing life and death, many people will make other considerations for the little ones in their hearts. After the meeting, Churchill did not stay in the Prime Minister's office for a moment and immediately returned to the Admiralty. Admiral Jellicoe, as well as the generals and experts of the Navy, are planning a batch of battleships that need to be built urgently. I was busy until the evening before the preliminary planning was completed. After briefly looking at the plan, Churchill immediately rushed to the Prime Minister's office and reported to Prime Minister Asquith, hoping to get his support immediately. He did this because he didn't want to waste even a minute. Prime Minister Asquith also postponed his break to listen to Churchill's report. Your Excellency, in order to deal with the Germans, we plan to start building the following battleships and battle cruisers within a month. First, we will rebuild the Iron Duke class battleships. Of course, the specific design will no longer be the same as before. Designed, but modified, the Revenge class battleship with enhanced defense and power. It can be regarded as an improved version of the Revenge class. The new Iron Duke class battleship will be equipped with triple-mounted 381mm main. The main armor will reach more than 330mm. We will build 4 Iron Duke battleships. Next, there will be a new King George V battleship. Although the previous George V, there is still one battleship left, but it has been proved by actual combat that it is no match for the Germans at all. Therefore, we plan to rebuild the battleship George V. The specific performance is comparable to that of the Iron Duke. In the subtle parts, improvements will be made. After that, there will be the Lion class battleship. The displacement of the Lion class battleship will exceed 40,000 tons, equipped with 3 triple-mounted 406mm main guns, and the thickness of the main armor will be increased to more than 380mm. Lion class. The Navy also plans to build 4 battleships. There are a total of 12 battleships of the above 3 levels, and construction will start in the next month. We will strive to complete them within 1.5 to 2 years. By then, we will have. It is not impossible to have enough strength to confront the Germans, or even defeat them. Churchill seemed very confident. Prime Minister Asquith nodded. He knows that the new King George V class battleships and the new Iron Duke class battleships are based on the Revenge class battleships with increased displacement, increased power and armor to improve its defense. The Lion class battleship is a brand new battleship. Chapter 258, King's Concern. Churchill, can these battleships really be built in 2 years? Prime Minister Asquith asked. There shouldn't be a big problem. The new Iron Duke class battleships and the new King George V class battleships are all modified on the basis of the Revenge class battleships. We will divide these 2 classes into 8. The battleships should not be too big of a problem if they are handed over to the major shipyards. As for the Lion class battleships, it is a little more difficult, not only to build a larger hull, but also to develop the 406mm main gun. It has not been completed yet. However, even if there are problems, I believe that with our strength, we can overcome them, Churchill said. Prime Minister Asquith nodded. On this issue, he chose to believe Churchill. In fact, he had no choice but to trust Churchill. In terms of battle cruisers, we plan to build 3 tiers of 10 battle cruisers, namely the Prestige class battle cruiser, the Glory class battle cruiser and the Hood class battle cruiser. The Prestige-class battlecruiser, both the Line Cruiser and the Glory-class battlecruiser, are equipped with 3 triple-mounted 381mm main guns, with a displacement of more than 35,000 tons, a maximum speed of 27 knots, and a main armor thickness of about 330mm. The German-class battlecruiser has a displacement of more than 40,000 tons, is equipped with 3 triple-mounted 406mm main guns, has a maximum speed of 27 knots, and has a main armor thickness of 350mm. Among them, the first 2 battlecruisers will each build 3 ships, and the rear 1-class battlecruisers, 4 ships will be built. The overall construction plan will be completed within 2 years, Churchill said. 12 battleships, plus 10 battlecruisers, are the most powerful battleships and battlecruisers. If these 22 battleships are completed and put into service, the Royal Navy will definitely be able to regain its glory. At that time, it can completely defeat the Germans. Prime Minister Asquith said with satisfaction. He believes that these warships will allow the Royal Navy to regain the ability to aspire to the world's #1 throne. Where are the Germans? Will they have a new construction plan? Prime Minister Asquith asked. If the Germans also start building new warships, they will probably be caught in an endless naval arms race. At that time, it is hard to say whether it will be delayed until the end. Your Excellency, our intelligence personnel are doing their best to inquire about the new German battleships and battlecruisers, but at present, they don't know anything about it. The Germans seem to have no plans to build other than the capital ships under construction. A new capital ship. I think this is because the Germans are too confident, thinking that with the capital ships they are building now, they can completely defeat the British Empire. Even if they find out about the British Empire's naval construction plan, and it is too late to start building new battleships, there is absolutely no way for them to complete the construction of these battleships in the shortest time like the British Empire. Churchill said proudly. Very good, very good. In this case, the Royal Navy might really be able to win. Prime Minister Asquith nodded in satisfaction. Your Excellency, the cost of this batch of warships will be very high, especially because we need to hurry as much as possible, so we need to recruit more skilled workers and divide them into 3 shifts to build them. The cost will be at least half that of other warships, Churchill said with some concern. Well, there is no way. Who made the British Empire face such a big crisis now? Prime Minister Asquith sighed. Although the British Empire is rich and powerful, if it is always wasted like this, it will not last long. However, if you don't fight hard, this may cause the British Empire to lose more benefits. The lesser of 2 evils can only be built more battleships. Your Excellency, if the Royal Navy possesses these warships, we will definitely be able to defeat the Germans and maintain the supremacy of the Empire. Churchill assured. Well, the British Empire must win, otherwise, we will all become sinners of the Empire. Prime Minister Asquith said. Churchill, how much do these 22 warships cost? Prime Minister Asquith asked. Your Excellency Prime Minister, we have initially estimated that it will cost about £70 million. Of course, it cannot be ruled out that it will rise a little bit. Churchill said. £70 million? Although he had already prepared for it, Prime Minister Asquith couldn't help but feel a little toothache when he heard this figure. The British Empire is indeed rich and powerful, but because of the war and the arms race before the war, they have already accumulated a lot of debt. If another £70 million were to be allocated to the Navy to build new warships, it would undoubtedly put them in high debt. Yes, Your Excellency the Prime Minister. After Churchill finished speaking, he looked at Prime Minister Asquith eagerly, for fear that he would retreat, because of the high cost. Well, I will discuss this appropriation with the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Parliament, and there will be no major problems. For the Royal Navy, I will fully support it. But at the same time, I also make a request, that is, in the future in war, the Royal Navy must win. Otherwise, all our efforts will be in vain, Prime Minister Asquith said. Yes, Your Excellency the Prime Minister. We will definitely win this war. Churchill said. Your Excellency, Your Majesty the King, please go to Buckingham Palace immediately. The secretary reported to Prime Minister Asquith. Okay, prepare the car. I'll go right away. Prime Minister Asquith ordered. Afterwards, he said to Churchill, His Majesty the King should also be concerned about the situation of the Navy. I will explain to him. Don't have any burdens. Find a way to further strengthen the Royal Navy. Yes, Your Excellency the Prime Minister. Churchill nodded and left. Prime Minister Asquith went to Buckingham Palace to meet King George V. As soon as George V saw Prime Minister Asquith, he left and asked, Your Excellency, the Royal Navy lost a long time in today's naval battle, losing 10 battleships. In the next battle, what will the Royal Navy do? Can you beat the Germans? Your Majesty, the Royal Navy has indeed just suffered a big defeat. However, we will not be discouraged by this, let alone admit defeat to the Germans. The Navy has submitted a new shipbuilding plan. Within 2 years, we can rebuild a more powerful Navy. At that time, we will have a decisive battle with the Germans. Victory must belong to us. Prime Minister Asquith expressed confidence. Seeing that Prime Minister Asquith was full of confidence, King George V's worries dissipated. Chapter 259. Pull the Americans into the water. Britain is a country with a constitutional monarchy. The monarch is only the nominal head of state, and power is restricted by the cabinet and parliament. However, the royal family has a high prestige among the people. Therefore, on many issues, the cabinet hopes to get the support of the monarch. This is especially true in war. In order to make George V confident in the Royal Navy, Prime Minister Asquith revealed the naval shipbuilding plan submitted by Churchill. After hearing this, George V was really happy. Very good, very good. The capital ships that the Navy wants to build are all powerful warships. With these capital ships, the Royal Navy will definitely be able to regain its glory. At that time, we can let the Germans pay their debts with blood, completely defeat them. Let them know that, if you want to challenge the hegemony of the British Empire, you are courting death. George V said excitedly. Yes, Your Majesty, we believe that future victories must belong to the Empire. Prime Minister Asquith said. George V nodded again and again. Is there any difficulty in the Navy? If anyone needs my help, just ask. After all, I'm still the king of this country, and I must help my country and defeat the enemy. Prime Minister Asquith just wanted to refuse, but when he thought of the royal family's hundreds of years, they had accumulated quite a lot of financial resources. So, I immediately had an idea. If financial support can be obtained from the royal family, then the pressure on the government will be much less. Your Majesty, it's mainly financial pressure. If these naval warships are to be built successfully, it will cost £70 million. And now it's just during the war, and the pressure on the government is very high. Therefore, it is difficult to raise so much money funding, Prime Minister Asquith said. In terms of funds, the royal family can provide some support. In this way, the royal family will contribute £20 million. The rest will be taken care of by the government. King George V said generously. You know, money in this era is very valuable. £20 million is already a big sum. According to the exchange rate, £20 million is equivalent to 400 million marks. Yes, Your Majesty. Prime Minister Asquith was overjoyed. The royal family invested £20 million, which at least relieved the urgent need. The preliminary work of the Navy's shipbuilding plan can already start preparations. You can think of a way for the money you need next. After leaving Buckingham Palace, the smile on Prime Minister Asquith's face disappeared. Now he still feels a lot of pressure. Although, with the support of the royal family, the Navy's shipbuilding plan can be launched immediately. However, they also face a series of difficulties. For example, it will take at least 2 years to complete the construction of these warships of the Navy. And the Germans, will they give them 2 years? This is undoubtedly very difficult. In addition, the German Navy's attack on the British sea transportation line is still continuing. After the Royal Navy suffered this loss, it was obvious that it could no longer attack the German Navy's breaking fleet. In this case, their sea transportation line will be cut off by the Germans sooner or later. At that time, I'm afraid that they will be directly dragged to death before 2 years. No, it can't go on like this. Otherwise, the British Empire will undoubtedly be defeated. Prime Minister Asquith's face was ugly. But how can it help the British Empire? Prime Minister Asquith began to think hard. When the car drove into the Prime Minister's office, Prime Minister Asquith finally sorted out his ideas. Come on, call the Secretary of the Navy and the Minister of Foreign Affairs immediately. I have something urgent to discuss with them. Prime Minister Asquith ordered. Yes, Your Excellency the Prime Minister. The Secretary immediately went to make arrangements. In less than half an hour, Churchill and Sir Edward Grey arrived at the Prime Minister's office. Although it is late now, neither of them has rested yet. As important ministers of the Empire, and at a time when the Empire was in crisis, the two of them were also very busy. You, too, I have called you here at such a late hour. I mainly want to see you. Is there any way to solve the crisis facing the Empire's sea transportation lines? If we can't solve the problem of sea transportation lines, I'm afraid we won't last 2 years. Yes, Prime Minister Asquith said. Churchill and Sir Edward Grey both nodded again and again. They naturally know that once the sea transportation line is cut off, it will be a problem for them to survive only with the resources of the British mainland, let alone fight the Germans. Your Excellency Prime Minister, the Germans use despicable warfare, and we are temporarily unable to decipher their tactics. However, to solve this problem, it is not without problems. Admiral John Jellicoe once made a suggestion. I think it's very effective, Churchill said. Oh, what advice? Prime Minister Asquith asked. Admiral John Jellicoe, suggest that our merchant ships fly the American flag, or simply hire American merchant ships to transport supplies for us. In this case, the Germans will not even launch an attack on American merchant ships. If they really, it is a good thing for the Empire to have that courage. Don't forget, the United States is also one of the major powers in the world. Their naval strength ranks behind the Empire and Germany. If they join the Empire to fight, they can beat Germany very quickly, said Prime Minister Churchill. Prime Minister Asquith nodded repeatedly. This is a very good way. If it is implemented in this way, the Germans will have no way to cut off our sea transportation line. Although we will spend more costs because of this, it is understandable of Your Excellency Prime Minister. In my opinion, we should still find a way to drag the Americans into the water. The Germans' performance in this war was too strong, which was completely beyond our expectations. If the Americans can join us, undoubtedly, we can defeat the Germans at the least cost. Sir Edward Grey also said, the Americans have been waiting for a price. It may be very difficult to get them to express their views and join us. Prime Minister Asquith frowned. We can think of other ways, for example, increase the order of war supplies to the Americans, and continue to lend to the Americans. In that case, it is as if they do not join our side to fight. Once we lose the war, what will they do? I can't get them. Sir Edward Grey smiled sinisterly. Prime Minister Asquith thought about it, and expressed his support for this proposal. Let our ambassador to the United States contact the Americans first. If possible, let the Americans join our camp. For this, we can give up some of our interests. Chapter 260. A big country is a bandit. As the largest industrial country in the world, the United States has surpassed the United Kingdom in industrial output value as early as the end of the last century, becoming the number 1 in the world. In addition, the United States also has a navy that is the 3rd largest in the world. Therefore, this makes the United States the target of the Allies and allies. It's just that the war has just begun, the situation is not yet clear, and the United States is unwilling to make a choice now. They want to wait for the price, or wait until the situation is clear, before joining the war, so that they can get the maximum benefit at the minimum cost. The unique geographical environment of the United States makes it the country of choice. The barrier between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean makes it difficult for other countries to launch attacks on their homeland. As long as a strong navy is maintained, the security of the country can be ensured. As for the army, the surrounding countries are all war scum, so there is nothing to worry about. Originally, the British looked down on Americans extremely, thinking that they were just navorish. I'm even more unwilling to let the influence of the United States expand to Europe, so I'm unwilling to let the United States intervene in this war. However, they never thought that Germany would be so powerful, and they almost knocked them down at the beginning of the war. Under such circumstances, the British naturally forgot their previous worries and tried their best to draw the Americans into their camp. This has become an important way for Britain to quickly defeat Germany and win the war. Of course, Americans are not fools, and naturally they will not easily let Britain do what they want. Therefore, Britain talents need to adopt various means to make the United States join their camp. Your Excellency, the Admiralty has proposed a way to enhance our strength, which requires your approval, Churchill said at the end of the conversation. In order to increase the strength of the British Navy as soon as possible. Churchill's hair was almost grey. Oh, what way? Prime Minister Asquith asked. He has approved the Navy's large-scale shipbuilding plan. But those warships will take at least a year and a half to complete the construction, so they still have to wait for a long time. Your Excellency Prime Minister, we still have 3 battleships built for other countries, which have not yet been delivered to other countries. However, they have been completed. If these 3 battleships can be included in the Royal Navy, this can instantly improve the Royal Navy strength, Churchill said. Are you talking about the battleships built for the Turks and Chile? Prime Minister Asquith frowned. The strength of the British Royal Navy has always been the best in the world, and Britain's shipbuilding capacity is also the strongest in the world. This makes other countries that do not have the ability to build battleships, when they want to have battleships, they often purchase them from the United Kingdom, and Britain is also happy to help them build. After all, the arms business is very profitable. Battleships, in particular, are even more lucrative. But they have already paid for it. If we requisition these battleships now, it may have a very adverse effect on the credibility of the British Empire. Sir Edward Grey, the Foreign Secretary, frowned. Sir Grey, I can't control so much now. The Royal Navy has suffered heavy losses and urgently needs battleships to replenish its strength. Requisitioning those 3 battleships is the best way, Churchill said. Although the 3 battleships are foreign trade battleships, their performance is not very strong. But now the Royal Navy is no longer qualified to pick and choose. Prime Minister Asquith frowned, as if he was thinking about the pros and cons of this. After a few minutes, he made a decision. Well, note to the Ottoman Turkish Empire and Chile that the battleships built for them were temporarily requisitioned by the Royal Navy. After the war is over, we will compensate them. Prime Minister Asquith made a decision. Although doing so will damage the credibility of the British Empire, for the current British Empire, finding a way to win the war is the most important thing. As for the others, they can be put aside for the time being. Yes, Your Excellency the Prime Minister. Sir Edward Grey nodded. Your Excellency, the Germans have been wooing the Ottoman Turkish Empire. Now that we are doing this, will the Ottoman Turkish Empire be pushed into the German camp? Sir Edward Grey asked. The Ottoman Turkish Empire should not join the Allies. After all, their geographical location is very important. They should know that once they join the Allies, they will inevitably encounter our attack. At that time, they will not be able to resist it. Live, said Prime Minister Asquith. The current Ottoman Turkish Empire is not the powerful empire that swept across Europe at the beginning. It has long since declined and become the sick man of West Asia. If it weren't for the mutual restraint among the major European powers, I'm afraid that troops would have been dispatched to destroy the Ottoman Turkish Empire long ago. Therefore, Prime Minister Asquith and others did not put the Ottoman Turkish Empire in their eyes at all, thinking that they would not dare to confront the British Empire at all. Even if the British Empire robbed their battleships, they could only swallow their anger. Churchill left the Prime Minister's office excitedly. He wanted to rush back to the Admiralty and send people to the shipyard to receive the 3 battleships immediately. The 3 battleships are the Sultan Osman I and the Rezidi built by the United Kingdom for the Ottoman Turkish Empire, and the Admiral latter built for Chile. Among them, the 2 battleships of the Ottoman Turkish Empire were originally built for Brazil. However, the Brazilians had no money to pay, so it was transferred to the Ottoman Turks. But I didn't expect that the Ottoman Turkish Empire had paid the money, but hadn't got the warship, so it was requisitioned by the British. This also became an important reason for the Ottoman Turkish Empire to join the Allies in the future. The British Navy named the 3 battleships Agincourt, Island and Canada respectively. Agincourt has a displacement of 30,000 tons, a maximum speed of 22 knots, and is equipped with 7 twin 305mm main guns. It can be called the battleship with the most main guns in the world. The island has a displacement of 25,000 tons, a maximum speed of 21 knots, and is equipped with 5 twin 305mm main guns. Canada has a displacement of 32,000 tons, a maximum speed of 22.75 knots, and is equipped with 5 twin 356mm main guns. These 3 battleships have powerful firepower, but they all have a strong style of British battleships. That is, they attach importance to firepower and speed, and despise defense. In the previous battles, it has been proved that it will not work at all. Chapter 261, The Rapture of Wilhelm II. On the night of September 5, 1914, at the Wilhelmshaven Naval Base, Kaiser Wilhelm II, Crown Prince Qin Tian, Minister of the Navy Marshal Earl Tirpitz, Chief of Naval Staff Marshal von Pohl and others all arrived here. They are here to welcome the battle cruiser formation of the Imperial Navy that has returned from a great victory point during the naval battle in the mid-Atlantic. The Imperial Navy was severely damaged. The British Navy sank 7 battleships and 3 battle cruisers, and severely damaged 1 battleship and 1 battle cruiser. Fell into ecstasy. For a long time, William II has been supporting the development of the Navy. For, isn't it just the hope that there will be such a day? Wilhelm II will surpass the British Navy as the target of the German Navy. Although, previously, this seemed like an impossible goal. But now it seems that this goal is within reach. At 8 o'clock in the evening, under the illumination of large searchlights, the entire military port was illuminated, as if it were daytime. One after another, the battleships sailed into the berths of the naval port. It can be clearly seen that these battleships still have bullet marks left in the battle and traces of being burned by the fire. This allows those who have not personally experienced this naval battle to appreciate how difficult this naval battle is. But fortunately, the final victory is still the Imperial Navy. Admiral Reinhard Scheer, Lieutenant General Hipper and Lieutenant General Spee walked down the gangway and came to William II. Your Majesty, the ministers fulfilled their mission and defeated the British Navy. Admiral Reinhard Scheer said. Okay, very good. Thank you for your hard work. I'm proud to have generals like you and brave naval soldiers. William II's face was full of smiles. The British have been the hegemony of the world for hundreds of years. Therefore, they dictated to the German Empire and ignored the legitimate demands of the German Empire. But now, the German Empire has taught the British a lesson and let them know that the German Empire it's not so easy to bully. Any act of provoking the German Empire will pay a heavy price. I hope that you will be able to lead the Imperial Navy to greater victories in the future. William II told Admiral Reinhard Scheer. The others said, yes, Your Majesty. Admiral Reinhard Scheer and others said. Next, William II gave a passionate speech for the returning naval officers and soldiers, which made the naval officers and soldiers even more confident in the future war. For the officers and soldiers of the Imperial Navy, this victory has indeed given them full confidence in future wars. Everyone, including William II, probably did not expect that this time the war would be so smooth. Although, before the outbreak of the war, the German Navy had already entered the fast lane of development, possessing a large number of advanced warships. However, these battleships are only advanced data on paper and have not been tested in actual combat. So, everyone is a little worried. But now it seems that the performance of the warships of the German Navy can completely suppress the British Navy, which finally makes them feel relieved. At the same time, he has even more admiration for Qin Tian, the designer of the capital ship of the German Navy. If Qin Tian hadn't designed these warships and single-handedly led the construction of these warships, it would have been almost impossible for the German Navy to achieve such a brilliant victory. Next, there is a grand celebration. The Admiralty has already been at the pier, preparing a lot of food and all kinds of alcohol. Except for the officers and soldiers on duty, everyone can participate in the celebration. This is also of great help in improving the morale of the troops. However, William II, Qin Tian and others did not participate in the celebration. They listened to the report of Admiral Reinhard Scheer and others in the conference room of the base, as well as the deployment of the next battle. Admiral Reinhard Scheer, Lieutenant General Hipper and Lieutenant General Spee made combat reports respectively. From their reports, it can be known that, although in this naval battle, the number of capital ships dispatched by the German Navy is far inferior to that of the British Navy. But, almost from the start of the fight, they were in the upper hand. And, gradually transformed into an overwhelming advantage. This enabled the German Navy to win a brilliant victory at the cost of a battle cruiser being severely damaged in this naval battle. I didn't expect that our battleship would be so powerful. Oscar, you did a good job. If the Imperial Navy can defeat the British in this war, you will be the first. William II said. Other senior naval officials also nodded. They have no objection to this statement of William II. Although, Qin Tian didn't personally go to the front line to fight against the British Navy. However, the role he played was much greater than that. Without the warships he built, the German Navy would have been blessed by God, not to mention defeating the British. After all, if the shipbuilding ideas of the experts of the Naval Technical Committee are followed, they have always followed the British as. Although it is safer, and will not take detours, it cannot achieve overtaking on curves, and surpass the British. Of course, it is now even more proof that the British attach importance to firepower and speed, and underestimate the design ideas of defense, which is fundamentally wrong. The emphasis on defense and survivability that the German Navy has always insisted on is correct. In Qin Tian's design, this point was brought to the extreme, which enabled the German Navy to easily win this battle. Father, marshals, and generals, I just did what I should do. Whether the Imperial Navy can defeat the British Navy in this battle is crucial. This is related to whether we can break through the British Navy. The People's Blockade will continue the war. The sinister intention of the British is undoubtedly to use their powerful navy to block our coastline, cut off our overseas trade, and slowly drag us to death. However, after this naval battle, I think the goal of the British should be impossible to achieve. Qin Tian said with a smile. It is impossible for the British, who have suffered heavy losses, to continue to blockade the German Empire. Our overseas trade may be restarted. Of course, the British will definitely learn from us and attack our merchant ships. Therefore, in my opinion, overseas trade should not be carried out for the time being, and will be restarted after the Imperial Navy completely defeats the British. Anyway, the supplies the Empire had stored before the war are enough for us to use for a long time. Marshal Count Tirpitz said. William II and Qin Tian both nodded in agreement. Chapter 262. Hanging Britain. The current strength of the Imperial Navy has completely surpassed that of the British Royal Navy? William II asked. Yes, Your Majesty. Whether it is the number of cutting-edge battleships or the combat effectiveness, we have already surpassed the British. Of course, if it is considered as a former dreadnought, the number of battleships of the British is still the largest in the world. However, those old-fashioned pre-dreadnoughts have no combat effectiveness at all in naval battles. Marshal Earl Tirpitz said. The German Navy also has more than 20 pre-dreadnoughts. As dreadnoughts and super-dreadnoughts have become the protagonists in naval battles, more of those pre-dreadnoughts can only be used as coastal defense warships. After this war ended, they were dismantled, which was even more doomed. The new capital ships of the German Navy, including 4 Nassau-class battleships, 5 Helgoland-class battleships, 5 Kaiser-class battleships, 5 King-class battleships, 3 Blücher-class battleships, class battle cruisers, 3 Moltke-class battle cruisers and 3 Derfflinger-class battle cruisers. A total of 19 battleships and 9 battle cruisers. In addition, there are 5 Bavaria-class battleships and 3 Mackensen-class battle cruisers under construction. If all are completed, the German Navy will have 24 cutting-edge battleships and 12 battle cruisers. In contrast to the British Navy, there is still 1 battleship dreadnought, 3 battleships Beldurfing, 3 battleships St. Vincent, 1 battleship Neptune, 2 battleships Giant, 4 1 Orion-class battleship, 1 King George V-class battleship, 2 Invincible-class battle cruisers, 1 Indefatigable-class battle cruiser, 2 Lion-class battle cruisers and Tiger battle cruiser, a total of 14 battleships and 6 battle cruisers. Of course, the British Navy still has 5 Queen Elizabeth-class battleships and 5 Revenge-class battleships that are about to enter service. If they are all in service, the British Navy will have 24 battleships and 6 battle cruisers. Of course, the German side did not know that the British had requisitioned 2 battleships built for the Ottoman Empire and 1 battleship built for Chile, which increased the number of battleships in the British Navy by 3. In this case, the 2 sides are basically equal in the number of capital ships. However, the capital ships of the German Navy have stronger combat effectiveness, which has already passed the test of naval battles. So, everyone, can we launch a decisive battle against the British Navy? If we conduct a decisive battle at this time, our chances of winning should be great. William II said, "Your Majesty, we have a great chance of winning a decisive battle with the British Navy at this time. However, the British are not fools. They will not fight us at this time. If I were the commander of the British Navy, I would definitely all the strength is huddled in the naval port. Wait until the warships that have not yet been in service are completed before they are put into service. Therefore, even if we try to fight the British, they will not agree. They will rely on strong and coastal fortifications and we confronted each other. In that case, we would have no advantage at all," said Marshal Count Tirpitz. "It is undoubtedly a stupid act to use battleships to attack strong coastal fortifications, unless it can have an overwhelming advantage. Otherwise, no one will do that." King William II couldn't help frowning. Could it be that we just watch the British regain their strength? In that case, the advantage we finally gained will gradually be lost again. William II seemed a little unwilling about this. "Father, it is not so easy for the British to restore their strength. Although their navy still has 2 tiers of 10 powerful battleships about to enter service, the Imperial Navy can still have an advantage. If the British take the initiative at that time, a decisive battle with us is naturally the best. If the British are not willing to fight us, then we will continue to fight, cut off the British sea transportation line, and directly drag the British to death. If the British don't fight us decisively, then it won't work," Qin Tian said. King William II did not answer immediately, but looked at the generals of the navy. "General Scheer, what do you think?" "Your Majesty, His Highness the Crown Prince's suggestion is very good. Since the British are unwilling to engage in a decisive battle with us, we can only use the tactic of breaking the war against them. At that time, even if the British want to build a large number of warships, to recover strength is also impossible. Once the sea transportation line is cut off, they simply don't have enough war supplies to support the construction of those warships. They don't even have enough food. At that time, what will the British have? Fight us?" Admiral Reinhard Scheer said. William II nodded. He is not a professional in the navy. "Since the commander of the High Seas Fleet thinks so, let's do this. He believes that this will be very beneficial to the German Empire. In this case, then continue to implement the blockade of the United Kingdom, sink all the British merchant ships, and send them all to the Atlantic Ocean to feed the fish." William II said. "Yes, Your Majesty," everyone replied. Because it was already very late, William II left early. Qin Tian stayed and discussed the next tactics with a group of naval generals. "Your Excellency Marshal, how is the performance of the submarine force?" Qin Tian asked. "Your Highness, the submarine force has performed very well. During this period of time, submarines have sunk more British merchant ships than the fleet. They have even sunk British warships. Although they are all small, it's a warship, but it's pretty good," Marshal Earl Tirpitz said with a smile. In the beginning, he took the submarine as a gadget hidden under the water, thinking that it couldn't change the outcome of the war at all. However, as the submarine force of the German Navy began to launch a fierce attack on British merchant ships, the British sea transportation line was gradually cut off, which made Marshal Earl Tirpitz start to face up to the strength of naval submarines. The role of submarines will be far more than that, and we need to further develop them. While we are developing submarines, we must also develop anti-submarine weapons. In this way, even if other countries also develop submarines, we will be able to deal with them," Qin Tian specifically mentioned. Chapter 263, Beware of America. Early the next morning, Wilhelm II and Qin Tian, together with Marshal Count Tirpitz and Marshal von Pohl, left Wilhelmshaven Naval Base by special train, and returned to Berlin. William II and the others had a lot of government and military affairs to deal with, while Qin Tian was going back to East Prussia to continue commanding the 8th Army. The rest of the 8th Army has been completed, and all the losses in the battle have been replenished. According to Qin Tian's planned plan, the 8th Army will attack the Kingdom of Poland from East Prussia in the next step. Even if the war is fought on their own land, they will pay a heavy price. It is best to burn the flames of war to other people's territory. In order to eliminate the Russian Northwest Front Army, the 8th Army had to choose tactics to lure the enemy deep. But now, the Northwest Front Army has been almost completely wiped out, and the Russian army has no decent troops in the Kingdom of Poland. Naturally, they don't need to defend anymore, and they can just switch to a full-scale attack. Though, now Russia is definitely also mobilizing troops into the Kingdom of Poland. But Qin Tian believed that the 8th Army could easily destroy the Russian Northwest Front Army, and it would also be able to deal with the Russian troops sent later. On the train, William II, Qin Tian and others discussed the current situation. The army launched the Battle of the Marne yesterday. The progress seems to be pretty good. If we can defeat the British and French forces in the Battle of the Marne, we will be able to advance the front directly to Paris. At that time, the French will be it is possible to withdraw from the war. We will win this war. William II talked eloquently and seemed to be full of confidence in the Battle of the Marne launched by the army. Although Qin Tian knew the result of the Marne River battle in another time and space, everything has changed in this time and space. Whether the German army can win the Battle of the Marne is still uncertain. However, based on what Qin Tian learned, I'm afraid that the battle situation is not as optimistic as William II said. Little Malky's orders were not well implemented in the armies on the Western Front. This may lead to the fact that the German army, like another time and space, failed to win the Battle of the Marne. As a result, the war inevitably entered a stalemate. Of course, even if Qin Tian knew this, he would not say it. Otherwise, it would be throwing cold water on William II. When William II was in high spirits, doing so was undoubtedly courting death. As long as our army can defeat France and the navy can defeat the British Royal Navy in a decisive battle, then we will win future wars. William II said. Yes, Royal Father, I'm also full of confidence in winning this war. However, I don't think we can be too optimistic before everything is settled. Qin Tian said. Oh, Oscar, do you have any worries? William II asked. Father, don't forget that on the other side of the ocean, there is a powerful country that has not made any statement about this war so far. If they join the war, it will have a great impact on the entire war, and even relations to win or lose. Qin Tian said. King William II couldn't help but frowned. You mean the United States? Your Highness, the United States has taken a neutral attitude so far. They shouldn't join the war, right? Even if they join the war, they won't necessarily be against us, right? Maybe they will join our camp as well. Maybe. Marshal von Paul said. No matter which side the Americans join, it will be very unfavorable to the German Empire. If the United States joins the Allied powers, then we will have to face a powerful hostile country. If we want to win the war, we have to pay more. And if the United States joins the Allies, it will be very bad for us. Because that means we will be forced to share the benefits with the Americans. This is for us who want to replace the United Kingdom and become the hegemony of the world, is unacceptable. Qin Tian said. The expressions of Wilhelm II, Marshal Earl Tirpitz, and Marshal von Paul suddenly became a little ugly. Before the war broke out, they didn't seem to have considered the attitude of the United States at all. They always believed that this war was a war of European countries, and the United States should not intervene. Oscar, the Americans may not intervene. Isolationism in their country is very prevalent. William II said. Qin Tian nodded. Indeed, the isolationism in the United States is a trouble. But if the United States wholeheartedly wants to join the war, I think this trouble is nothing. The US government has 100 ways to solve it. This trouble, Your Highness, even if the United States joins the war, we have nothing to fear, right? Except for the strength of the US Navy, which is slightly stronger. Their army is simply rubbish. Marshal Count Tirpitz said. The US Army, before entering the war, only had more than 100,000 people. This is because there are no powerful countries around the United States. In addition, the current United States is not the Uncle Sam who will dominate the world in later generations. It can be regarded as a boy Sam at most, and there is no need to send troops overseas. Therefore, their army has always been relatively small. As for the US Navy, although its strength is not weak, it is relatively speaking. The US Navy ranks third in the world, after the United Kingdom and Germany. However, since the German Navy can beat the British Navy, it naturally doesn't have to be afraid of the Americans. However, if the British and Americans unite, they can cause some trouble to the German Navy. But it's just troublesome. The German Navy is still capable of dealing with it. The military strength of the United States is indeed not strong now, but don't forget that their industrial output value surpasses ours. Once the Americans decide to join the war and start mobilizing with all their strength, with their industrial scale and population, they can quickly arm an army of several million soon. Once this army appears in Europe, it will be a great threat to us. Qin Tian said. William II couldn't help frowning even tighter. Oscar, what can you do? William II asked. Qin Tian shook his head. I have nothing to do. The only thing I can do is to win the war before the Americans decide to join the war. In this case, even if the Americans want to join the war, they will be late. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 264, American Concerns. The impact of the mid-Atlantic naval battle between Britain and Germany was undoubtedly far-reaching. Not only did Germany see the Royal Navy's external strength, but it also made the Royal Navy realize that they are very likely to lose in this war. This also made the British begin to think of other ways to recover their disadvantages and win the war. On the morning of September 6th, the British ambassador made an emergency meeting with the US Secretary of State William Jennings Bryan. Hello, Your Excellency, Secretary of State. Compared with the past, the face of the British ambassador was less proud and more humble. You know, in the past, the British used to look like country bumpkins or navorish in front of Americans. Historically, the United States was a British colony. Although, in the American War of Independence, the British were defeated and had to pinch their noses to recognize the independence of the United States. However, that is because of a variety of factors. If France hadn't been fighting Britain all over the world at that time, so that Britain could not do its best to suppress the resistance of the Americans, perhaps the Americans would not have won the War of Independence at all, and there would be no United States of America today. Hello, Your Excellency the Ambassador. A hint of surprise flashed in Secretary Bryan's eyes. The United States is currently of the news that the British Navy lost in the naval battle. Your Excellency, Secretary of State, I was ordered to ask for support from the United States of America. Ongoing war has made the British Empire feel a little powerless, especially after the Germans despicably adopted the method of breaking the war. Our sea transportation line is facing destruction. The danger of being cut off. The British government wants to hire American merchant ships to transport supplies for us. In addition, we hope that the US government can provide us with a loan. This loan will be used to purchase war materials in the United States and shipped to us by American merchant ships. England, said the British ambassador. After hearing this sentence, Secretary of State Bryan was stunned. Is this something that a proud British can say? You know, haven't the British always looked down on them? Now he actually took the initiative to ask them for help. Could it be that the sun came out from the west? Your Excellency, I admit that what you just said surprised me very much. Did something happen? After all, the war has just begun, and the British Empire can't hold on anymore. This is really unbelievable, said Secretary Bryan. Your Excellency, on behalf of the British government, I sincerely invite the United States of America to join the Allied powers and fight against the evil Allies. If the Allies win the war, the whole of Europe and the whole world will be under their evil rule. At that time, the United States will definitely not be able to survive alone, the British ambassador said. Secretary of State Bryan's face became tense. What the British ambassador said made him very nervous. How did this happen? The powerful British Empire is actually pessimistic about the situation of the war. Doesn't this mean that the British are about to be defeated? How is this possible? Secretary Brian exclaimed. In the eyes of Secretary of State Brian, Britain is the hegemon of the world. Although the industrial output value of the United Kingdom has been surpassed by the United States and Germany successively, the United Kingdom, which has vast overseas colonies, still has the most powerful navy in the world. With the help of a powerful navy, their overseas interests can be guaranteed. It can be said that, as long as the world colonial system built by Britain does not collapse, Britain will still be a world superpower. However, now that the war has only started for more than a month, the British feel that they cannot win the war, which is really unbelievable. Your Excellency, it is not up to me to decide whether to join the Allied powers. I need to report to the President. However, I personally advocate joining the Allied powers. However, I need a reason to convince the President and the Cabinet. Please tell me what the **** happened? Secretary Brian asked. Your Excellency, Secretary of State, until now, I will not hide from you. The Royal Navy has fought 2 naval battles with the Germans. In the first naval battle, we failed. The battle cruiser Lion was sunk, said the British ambassador. Secretary of State Brian nodded. The battle cruiser Lion was sunk, and the United States has also received related news. However, it was just the loss of a battle cruiser, which was nothing to the rich and powerful British. Yesterday, we had another naval battle in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The Royal Navy tried to destroy the German Navy's breaking fleet, but instead fell into an ambush by the Germans. During the fierce battle, the Royal Navy suffered heavy losses. 7 powerful ships, the battleships, were sunk, and 3 battle cruisers were sunk. Another battle cruiser and a battleship were severely damaged. It can be said that the Royal Navy has suffered a heavy blow and has been shattered. Britain, the ambassador, did not hold back and told Secretary of State Brian all about the failure of the Royal Navy. The British side believes that only when the Americans feel the strength of Germany will they feel cold, and they will fully support the United Kingdom and even join the Allied powers to fight. After all, the British also know the ambitions of the Americans very well. The Americans, like the Germans, want to replace Britain as the world's hegemon. It's just that their attitude is a little more moderate, not as radical as the Germans. However, it is essentially the same. If the Germans win this war, Germany will inevitably replace Britain and become the world hegemon. A German empire ruling Europe would be stronger than the current British Empire. At that time, it will be impossible for the United States to become the world hegemon again. If the Americans still want to become the hegemony of the world, then they will absolutely not be able to let the Germans win this war. Are the Germans so powerful? Secretary of State Brian was completely shocked. Your Excellency, Secretary of State, we need the support of the United States of America. The British ambassador said. Your Excellency, Ambassador, I will report to Your Excellency the President immediately. Secretary of State Brian said. After the British ambassador left, Brian rushed to the White House to report the news to President Wilson. At the same time, before leaving, he notified the other cabinet ministers by phone. For such a major event, the US government must handle it carefully. Whether to join the war will affect the future of the United States. Chapter 265, Can't Let Germany Win. When Secretary of State Brian arrived at the White House, the cabinet members had almost arrived. President Woodrow Wilson, speaking with Vice President Thomas R. Marshall. Obviously, doesn't everyone know much about the emergency that Brian said? Mr. Brian, please sit down. What happened? President Wilson asked. Your Excellency, the British Royal Navy suffered a disastrous defeat yesterday, losing more than 10 capital ships. The Royal Navy has been wounded. They have fallen into a disadvantage in the confrontation with the Germans. Secretary of State Brian said. What? How is this possible? How could the Royal Navy lose to the Germans? They are the strongest navy in the world. Mr. Brian, are you not joking? How could the Royal Navy lose to the Germans? Navy Secretary Joseph Daniels asked. He has always been somewhat complacent about the fact that the US Navy can rank 3rd in the world. But now, the German Navy has actually completed a counterattack, which undoubtedly has a great impact on his concept. Once the Royal Navy is really defeated, the German Navy will be number 1 in the world. The US Navy is absolutely impossible to compare with the German Navy. Mr. Daniels, I'm not joking. In fact, the British ambassador has just left my office. The proud Anglo-Saxons, who have humbled their noble disclosures, are begging the United States to support them and better join them in the camp of the Germans, fighting the Germans, Secretary Blaine said. "God, the world is changing too fast. Those proud British people will bow their heads to us. Don't they always regard us as nouveau riche? I never thought that the British would have such a day." Vice President Marshall laughed. The other members of the American cabinet also laughed. The current situation of the Britain made them very happy. "Gentlemen, everyone, stop laughing. The British can't hold it so quickly. This is probably not a good thing for the United States of America. Everyone think about it. What should we do next to be able to let the United States of America gain the greatest benefit?" President Wilson said. He has always regarded this war as a good opportunity to expand the influence of the United States. With the help of the World War, making war windfalls will not only bring the US economy to a higher level, but also greatly weaken the strength of European powers. In this case, the United States may take the opportunity to rise and even replace the United Kingdom and become the world hegemony. However, the war has only started for more than a month now, and the British can't hold it anymore. This is completely beyond President Wilson's expectations. The strength shown by Germany in this war seems to be too strong. Once Germany wins the war, I'm afraid it will definitely not be a good thing for the United States of America. In that case, the United States will only be able to shrink the American continent and will no longer be able to compete for the throne of world hegemony. This is absolutely unacceptable to President Wilson. Cabinet members shut up immediately. As President Wilson said, the Germans won the war, which is not a good thing for the United States. Your Excellency, the longer this war goes on, the better for us. If the European powers can lose both sides in this war, then they will have to give up the leadership of the world. In this case, we will easy world leadership, said Secretary of War Lindley M. Garrison. Of course we hope that this war will last as long as possible. In this way, we can sell more war materials to the warring parties. But unfortunately, everything does not seem to be developing in the direction we hoped. Minister of Finance William Jobs McAdoo said, "The current situation is indeed somewhat difficult for the United States. They didn't want to see Germany win the war, but they didn't want to join the war if they wanted them to." Secretary Daniels, "If the US Navy and the British Navy join forces, can we defeat the Germans?" President Wilson asked. "Your Excellency, we don't know the specific strength of the German Navy. However, even the British were easily defeated. Then, it can be seen that the strength of the German Navy is undoubtedly very strong. Now, the US Navy has only 10 dreadnoughts. Although there are 4 more under construction, they will not enter service soon. The other battleships are pre-dreadnoughts. Naval battles have proved that those pre-dreadnoughts are already obsolete. If we enter the war, even together with the British Navy, it is estimated that it will be difficult to defeat the Germans. At most it will be a tie." Minister Daniels said. President Wilson's complexion suddenly became ugly. Such a result made him somewhat unacceptable. "Are we really unable to prevent the Germans from winning this war?" President Wilson asked. "Your Excellency, I think the British may have exaggerated. Although they lost more than 10 capital ships, this is certainly a serious injury to the Royal Navy. But if the Royal Navy has no power to fight back, then it is too exaggerated. According to the information we have received, the Royal Navy has 10 super battleships equipped with 381mm main guns under construction, and it is estimated that they will be able to enter service next year. Therefore, the Royal Navy has 10 super battleships equipped with 381mm main guns under construction, and it is estimated that they will be able to enter service next year. Navy should still have the power to fight." Minister Daniels said. "What do the British mean? In order to drag us into their camp, did they deliberately deceive us?" Secretary of State Bryan said. "The British are not counting on deceiving us. I think the Germans should be too strong, making the Royal Navy have no confidence in future wars. Therefore, they can't wait to get our support. It dragged us into the war." Minister Daniels analyzed. President Wilson nodded, thinking that Minister Daniels' analysis is quite reliable. "Gentlemen, should we join the war now? Should we join the camp of the Allied powers and fight against the Allies?" President Wilson asked. Your Excellency, it would be too early to join the war now, as the situation is not yet clear. Of course we cannot let the Germans win the war, but the United States of America must not be easily involved in the war. Minister of War Garrison stated. Chapter 266, Secret Support. Your Excellency, isolationism is prevalent in the country now. If we are directly involved in the war, this may arouse strong opposition from the people. Therefore, it is not a good idea to get involved in the war now. Vice President Marshall, Your Excellency, I also think that we should wait until the situation becomes clearer before deciding whether to join the war or which side to join. Secretary of the Navy Daniels also said, Gentlemen, what should we do with the British request? Asked President Wilson. Your Excellency, since the British want to hire our merchant ships, buy our war materials, and lend us loans, we can agree to them. In this way, we can further stimulate the development of our economy. At the same time, it can also strengthen the strength of the Germans. The Germans breaking war is indeed about to hang the British. The British mainland is small and relies heavily on sea transportation. Once the sea transportation line is completely cut off by the Germans, they will be completely finished. Minister of Commerce Redfield said, it would be best if the Germans could not win the war. Before the war broke out, a large amount of German capital entered South America and competed with us for South America. Once the Germans won the war, I'm afraid they will be even more unscrupulous. At that time, we will most likely lose South America. I think everyone doesn't want this to happen. Redfield continued. The faces of the senior officials of the American cabinet present all of a sudden became serious. The US government has always regarded the Americas as its own back garden and will never allow other countries to intervene in the Americas. The previous competition between the United States and Germany in South America has aroused the vigilance of the US government. If Germany really won the war, they would definitely speed up their scramble for South America. At that time, Germany will become the world's hegemon. Will the United States still be able to hold South America? Your Excellency, we secretly support the British. Let the British and the Germans fight. It is best for them to fight and lose both sides. In this case, it will be beneficial to us. Minister Garrison said. But, if we do this, will it anger the Germans? Vice President Marshall was a little worried. As a neutral country, the United States did not participate in the war. The relationship between us and the British is just a normal trade relationship. The Germans can't prohibit us from trading with the United Kingdom, right? The military strength of the United States of America is not very strong. However, it is definitely not something that the Germans can bully at will. Secretary of State Bryan said. President Wilson thought about it and then nodded. You can agree to the British's request and let them hire our merchant ships to transport supplies for them. You can also sell war supplies to them, but the price must go up. As for the loan, can also be provided to them. However, the British must have collateral, such as gold, or their colonies. The United States practices mercantilism, and the senior officials of these governments are undoubtedly very clear about the way of business. Now that the British have something to ask them, of course they will take the opportunity to open their mouths and make a fortune from the British. You know, the United States now owes a lot of foreign debts, and it is the world's largest debtor country. Whether they can pay off all those debts depends on how much war fortune they can make in this war up. Britain has been the overlord for hundreds of years, and the wealth it has accumulated is undoubtedly amazing. It would undoubtedly be better if the United States could wrest that wealth from the British. In addition, the United States is also coveted by the huge British. The United States rose too late. Like the Germans, when they successfully rose and wanted to participate in the carve-up of the world, they found that the world had already been carved up too late. So, they just got some leftovers. Now, it is undoubtedly a good opportunity for them to take advantage of the fire. Yes, Your Excellency the President. Secretary of State Bryan nodded. He already fully understood what President Wilson meant. However, on the German side, we can't make enemies with them. If the development of the war situation is very beneficial to the Germans, even if the Germans are destined to win the war, we can't be enemies with the Germans. The United States of America will always be on the victor's side. President Wilson said. This cannot be blamed on the reality of the Americans. There is no other way. If you stand on the wrong team and stand on the loser's side, even the United States will inevitably suffer heavy losses. Yes, Your Excellency the President. The other cabinet ministers nodded one after another. Gentlemen, the development of this war has exceeded our expectations. The strength of the Germans is unexpectedly strong. Therefore, there are not many opportunities for us to choose. Next, we must be more careful, be cautious. Every decision you make must be more careful, and it is directly related to the future of the American Republic, President Wilson said. Your Excellency, I think that under the current situation, it is necessary for us to strengthen our military construction. The army is nothing more than that. No country has the ability to cross the ocean and attack the mainland of the United States. Our navy must be further strengthened. Okay. 10 dreadnoughts and 4 battleships under construction are too few, far from being able to compare with Britain and Germany. Therefore, we need to have a stronger navy. Otherwise, this will make us in the future international society, the right to speak, will become weaker and weaker. Vice President Marshall said. Well, the strength of the navy should indeed be further strengthened. President Wilson nodded. Minister Daniels, the navy should submit a new warship construction plan as soon as possible. The navy of the Republic of America must be at the forefront of the world. Other countries who want to provoke the Republic of America have to think about it. President Wilson said. Once Germany wins the war, Germany will be more difficult to deal with than Britain. In addition to the strong navy, the British army is not strong. But Germany is different. The German army has long been number one in the world. If Germany's navy also becomes the number one in the world, then no country in the world has a military strength that can compete with it. If the United States wants to ensure its own interests, it must further strengthen its military strength. Yes, Your Excellency the President. Secretary Daniels nodded. Chapter 267. Marching to Warsaw. East Prussia, Königsberg. Qin Tian came back here again. Now is the time of war. Qin Tian found that he seems to prefer to stay with the army. In troubled times, it is undoubtedly every man's dream to build a career. Even though Qin Tian is now the crown prince of the empire, he still has a dream of being a general in his heart. The 8th Army, under his leadership, has won one victory after another on the battlefield. When Qin Tian rushed back to Königsberg from Berlin, the 8th Army had already completed its rest. And, according to the scheduled plan, military operations began. Only the general staff remains in Königsberg. The 11th Army, 17th Army, and 20th Army under the 8th Army, as well as the 8th Armored Division, have left the station successively, crossed the border between East Prussia and the Kingdom of Poland, and began to march towards Warsaw. Is our advance going smoothly now? Have we encountered any resistance from the Russians? Qin Tian asked, as soon as he entered the 8th Army Staff Headquarters. Your Highness, the advancement of all ministries is relatively smooth at present, and there is no resistance from the Russians for the time being. The Northwest Front Army of the Russian army was almost wiped out by our army before. Although they have sent reinforcement, they have not yet arrived. The whole there are only 10,000 to 20,000 Russian troops left in the Kingdom of Poland. And, almost all of them are huddled in Warsaw. Therefore, we can advance all the way quickly. At this speed, it only takes 5 days for us to reach Warsaw. Major General Ludendorff introduced to Qin Tian. Qin Tian nodded, and the after effects of the almost complete annihilation of the Russian Northwest Front Army have already appeared. The Russian army, that has not yet completed mobilization, has no power to stop the advance of the German 8th Army on the battlefield of the Kingdom of Poland. What reinforcement did the Russians send to the Kingdom of Poland? How many are there? When will they arrive in the Kingdom of Poland? Qin Tian asked. Our friends from the Buddhist party have already provided us with information. However, Tsar Nicholas II ordered the 9th Army of the Russian Army and the 2nd Guards Army to reinforce the Kingdom of Poland. These two corps are still on their way. It will take at least a week to reach Warsaw. If we destroy the railway line, it will take them even longer. When they arrive in Warsaw, they will find that Warsaw has fallen into our hands. On the Hindenburg wall laughed. The 9th Army and the 2nd Guards Army? Isn't the 9th Army fighting against the Austro-Hungarian Empire? How come there is still room to go north? The 2nd Guards Army is the main force of the Russians defending Moscow. Nicholas II this once. Is it going to cost money? Qin Tian asked. Your Highness, the Russian Ninth Army's ability to go north is undoubtedly the reason why our ally, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was unable to hold the Russians back. Otherwise, how dare they deploy their troops to go north? In fact, the Austro-Hungarian Empire is fighting with the Russians did not fight well on the battlefield, and they have already been defeated by the Russians. If it weren't for their sufficient strength, they might have collapsed. Major General Ludendorff looked contemptuous. Although, the Austro-Hungarian Empire is a staunch ally of the German Empire. However, these generals of the German army looked down on the combat effectiveness of the Austro-Hungarian army. The Russians were vulnerable in the battle with us. However, in the battle with the Austro-Hungarian army, they seemed to be very capable. Sometimes I really doubt that the Russian army we encountered, is it the same Russian army? Could it be that the Russians sent all their elites to fight against the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the people who came to deal with us were the mob instead? Admiral Hindenburg was also a little amused. Actually, it might just be the opposite. You must know that the Northwest Front Army of the Russian army is the main force that has assembled the standing army of the Russian army. What the Austro-Hungarian army had to face was only a small number of main forces of the Russian army. The other troops are second-line troops. But even so, the Austro-Hungarian army failed to win. It can be seen how bad their combat effectiveness is. The Austro-Hungarian army has been weak for a long time, so we can't force them too much. It's not bad that they can hold back hundreds of thousands of Russians for us, Qin Tian said. Qin Tian is very clear about the combat effectiveness of the Austro-Hungarian army. In another time and space, their performance was very bad. It can be said that, whether it was against the Russians, the Serbs, or the Italians later, it was all thanks to the help of the German army. Otherwise, they would not be able to win at all. As for the Second Guards Army of the Russian army, its combat effectiveness should indeed not be weak. But that's all. The 8th Army is still confident of defeating them. Nicholas II sent out the Second Guards Army, but there is no it's a matter of solution. Who made the mobilization efficiency of the Russian army so low? The Kingdom of Poland is very important to Russia. If the Kingdom of Poland is lost, Russia will be very passive in this war. As a last resort, only Tsar Nicholas II would call out the Second Guards Army. Major General Ludendorff said. If we defeat the Second Guards Army again, will Nicholas II also send out the First Guards Army? Qin Tian asked. What does your highness mean? Admiral Hindenburg and Major General Ludendorff were a little puzzled. They knew that Qin Tian would not raise this question without reason. The First Guards Army is a force defending St. Petersburg. If the First Guards Army is deployed, it will inevitably empty St. Petersburg. Our Russian friends seem to have a chance. As long as Russia is in chaos, it will be easier for us to obtain victory, Qin Tian said with a smile. Your Highness, it is entirely possible. Admiral Hindenburg's eyes lit up. Your Highness, it seems that we have to modify the battle plan. We must find a way to wipe it out, at least severely damage the First Russian Guards Army. Ludendorff also laughed. Gentlemen, it seems that you have understood what I mean. Well, let's do it. I suggest that the headquarters be moved from Königsberg to the front, preferably not far from Warsaw. In this way we can grasp the situation on the front line as soon as possible, Qin Tian suggested. Hindenburg and Ludendorff did not reject Qin Tian's proposal. That afternoon, Qin Tian and the others set off from Königsberg and took the train to the southern border of East Prussia. There, change another car and head to Warsaw. Chapter 268, surround the spot to fight for aid. On September 8th, Qin Tian and others were less than 50 kilometers away from Warsaw. An infantry division of the 11th Army of the 8th Army of the German Army even approached a small town only 10 kilometers away from Warsaw and had a firefight with the Russian troops stationed here. After a slight resistance, the Russian army retreated into the city of Warsaw. Obviously, the Russian Northwest Front Army, which was almost wiped out, no longer has the ability to confront the German army. The reason why they shrink their forces and give up a large area of territory, except Warsaw, is that they hope to be able to hold out in Warsaw until the arrival of reinforcement. Check her now, City Hall. It has been requisitioned by the 8th Army of the German Army and has become the temporary headquarters of the 8th Army in the Kingdom of Poland. Qin Tian, General Hindenburg, Major General Ludendorff and others work here. Your Highness, the forward of the 11th Army has arrived in Warsaw, and they request to launch an attack on Warsaw. Colonel Manstein reported. An infantry division attacked Warsaw? Can it be taken? Qin Tian asked. Your Highness, in Warsaw, there are only 20,000 Russian troops at most. And they are 20,000 Russian troops with weak fighting will. If one of our infantry divisions defeats them and then takes Warsaw, there should be no problem. Hindenburg the general said confidently. An infantry division of the 8th Army, although the number is only more than 16,000 people. However, their equipment is much more advanced than the Russian army. It can be said that compared with the poorly equipped Russian army, it is completely armed to the teeth. It is not a problem at all to defeat more than 20,000 Russian troops with one infantry division. Qin Tian nodded. Everyone said, shall we take Warsaw? Your Highness, the staff believes that keeping Warsaw is more beneficial to us than taking Warsaw. Major General Ludendorff said. Oh, does the staff have any plans? Qin Tian asked. General Hoffmann, please introduce the battle plan submitted by the War Department to His Highness. Major General Ludendorff said. Yes, Chief of Staff. Brigadier General Hoffmann stood up. Your Highness, the main purpose of our current operations in the Kingdom of Poland is to occupy the Kingdom of Poland. The threats to us are the Russian 9th Army and the 2nd Guards Army. As for the Northwest Front Army in Warsaw, the remnants of the enemy are no longer a cause for concern. We only need to leave an infantry regiment in Warsaw to guard against them. Our main force is used to deal with the two fronts of the Russian army. As the capital of the Kingdom of Poland, Warsaw, the 9th Army of the Russian Army and the 2nd Army of the Guards will definitely come for reinforcement. And we will use Warsaw as a bait to attack the two Russian armies, said Brigadier General Hoffmann. Qin Tian understood what he meant, and he planned to gather around the spot for help. However, this is indeed a very good way to occupy the Kingdom of Poland. The most important thing is to defeat the two Russian army groups that came to rescue the Northwest Front Army. After defeating them, naturally all problems can be solved. Warsaw will fall into their hands easily like a ripe peach. Yes, this strategy is very feasible. However, I also make a request. Qin Tian said. What request does your highness have? Major General Ludendorff asked. The two armies of the Russian army should not be defeated, but encircled and wiped out as much as possible. Qin Tian said. Russia has too many people and too many troops. If it can be wiped out, it must not just be defeated. If Germany wants to defeat Russia, or even destroy Russia, you have to find ways to get rid of their vital forces. Yes, your highness. We will do our best. Major General Ludendorff said. What is the specific battle plan? Qin Tian asked. Your highness, the 9th Army of the Russian army has arrived in Lublin, and the 2nd Guards Army is in Białystok. Lublin is about 120 kilometers away from Warsaw. Białystok, Warsaw is 150 kilometers away. We plan to launch a siege to one of the two Russian armies after approach they Warsaw. With the 8th Armored Division as the vanguard, their defenses can be easily torn apart. The infantry will advance further, so as to crush them, and eat them in one fell swoop. After eating one army group, they will attack another army group. Our troops can be transported by a large number of trucks, much faster than the Russian army. So, don't be afraid of them slipping away. Brigadier General Hoffmann said. The tactics adopted by the 8th Army this time can be described as quite simple. But they have strong strength as a support. Even if it is a simple tactic, the probability of success is very high. At least, so far, no Russian army can stand the attack of the 8th Armored Division. They can easily smash the defense of the Russian army and open the way for the subsequent infantry attack. Even directly defeated the Russian army. At that time, which group of the Russian army is closer to us, we will attack that group first. However, at this time, we must prevent the other Russian army from coming to the rescue. Qin Tian said. Yes, your highness. Major General Ludendorff and others nodded. In the battle against the Russian army, the German army seldom needs to rely on subtle tactics to win, and can crush the Russian army directly with its strong strength. But if you face the armies of Britain, France and other countries, you need to be a little more cautious. Although the firepower of the 8th Army is also stronger than that of the British and French allied forces, other German troops will not have much advantage. Although Russia is one of the great powers, their army is not very powerful. The reason why they can be among the great powers is entirely because they have too many troops. So much so that other countries are terrified. After the 8th Army of the German army determined the tactics of besieging and attacking aid, it only besieged and did not attack Warsaw. Even, except for the infantry division of the 11th Army, the other troops did not even approach Warsaw anymore, but began to rest. A large number of materials from Germany were transported by road to various troops to prepare for the war. The 9th Army of the Russian Army and the 2nd Army of the Guards continued to advance towards Warsaw. However, after entering the territory of Poland, the actions of the Russian army became more cautious, and the speed of advancement also slowed down a lot, with a maximum of 20 to 30 kilometers a day. In this case, it will take nearly a week to arrive in Warsaw. Regarding the slow action of the Russian army, the German army is naturally somewhat dissatisfied with the slowdown. In order to urge the Russian army to move faster, the German army began to pretend to attack Warsaw. Chapter 269. Russians are very cooperative. In the city of Warsaw, the headquarters of the Russian Northwest Front Army point, since the Russian First Army and Second Army were almost completely annihilated, General Ivan Zhilinsky, the commander of the Russian Northwest Front, was very anxious, for fear that Tsar Nicholas II would directly order him to be arrested and sent to prison. Hanged. However, after several days passed, Tsar Nicholas II did not issue such an order, which made Admiral Ivan Zhilinsky heave a sigh of relief while feeling puzzled. After all, no one wants to die. Until later, when Nicholas II issued an order, he only reprimanded Admiral Ivan Zhilinsky, but did not remove him from the post of commander of the Northwest Front Army. At the same time, two group armies were also dispatched to reinforce the Kingdom of Poland, under the command of the Northwest Front Army. This made Admiral Ivan Zhilinsky very grateful, and in the telegram sent to Nicholas II, he even stated that he would definitely defend the Kingdom of Poland. If he can't keep it, he will commit suicide and apologize. After reading the telegram sent by Admiral Ivan Zhilinsky, Nicholas II threw it aside and ignored it. It wasn't that he didn't want to convict Admiral Ivan Zhilinsky. He really couldn't find a suitable candidate to replace Admiral Ivan Zhilinsky. General Ivan Zhilinsky served as the chief of staff of the Russian army, and the other generals more or less gave him some face. If it were someone else, I'm afraid they would not be able to command those arrogant soldiers immediately. Other Russian generals seemed unwilling to go to the Kingdom of Poland to take over this mess. In fact, they are also very clear that the situation in the Kingdom of Poland is already very tense. After the German army won the victory in East Prussia, the next step must be to attack the Kingdom of Poland. Since he is the commander of the Northwest Front Army, he has to fight against the powerful German army. With the president of the Northwest Front Army, everyone is afraid that it will become the next target of the Germans to defeat. In that case, the consequences would be very serious. If it doesn't work out, even my life will be lost. Therefore, Admiral Ivan Zhilinsky was able to escape, and he continued to sit in his current position. General Letsky and General Krapovich, when will they arrive in Warsaw? Admiral Ivan Zhilinsky looked very anxious. Now, the German army has arrived in Warsaw, but the reinforcement of the Russian army have not yet arrived. If the German army launched an attack, how could such a small number of Russian troops in Warsaw be able to defend it? After the failure of the two battles in East Prussia, which led to the destruction of the First and Second Armies, Admiral Ivan Zhilinsky had already developed a fear of the German army. General, the 9th Army is still in Lublin, and the 2nd Guards Army has just set off from Białystok. The staff officer reported. Arsehole. Didn't they report yesterday that they are heading towards Warsaw? Why are they still on the way now? Admiral Ivan Zhilinsky was furious. If the reinforcement cannot reach Warsaw for a day, he has no way to rest assured. I'm afraid that the German army will attack. Once he can keep Warsaw, then his end will undoubtedly be very tragic. General, the German artillery is preparing, and it looks like it will launch an artillery attack on Warsaw soon. Suddenly, an officer rushed into the headquarters and reported to Admiral Ivan Zhilinsky. Damn it. Admiral Ivan Zhilinsky couldn't help cursing. Boom. Boom. Suddenly, continuous explosions sounded in the city, and one building after another was destroyed under the shelling of the German army. Residents of Warsaw fled long before the Germans launched their offensive. For these civilians, the German army did not stop them. Now, almost all that remains in Warsaw is the Russian army. Therefore, the German army was able to fire unscrupulously. Boom. A shell exploded not far from the Russian army's headquarters. This made Ivan Zelensky's face even more ugly. Send a telegram to the 9th Army and the 2nd Guards Army, telling them that they must arrive in Warsaw within 3 days. Otherwise, I will report their disobedience to His Majesty the Tsar. I want to see, will they be able to bear the responsibility for the defeat? Admiral Ivan Zelensky said with a gloomy face. He is obviously going to play a rogue. If the responsibility for the defeat can be shifted to General Letsky and General Krapovich, then he can take the opportunity to get away. As for what kind of consequences this will cause, I'm afraid it is not his consideration. Yes, General. The communications officer immediately went to send a telegram. According to General Ivan Zelensky, the reason why General Letsky and General Krapovich were slow on the road was simply to punish him. Once Warsaw fell, and the Kingdom of Poland perished, Tsar Nicholas II would definitely not let him go. Therefore, he must try his best to save his own life. If the two of them still don't obey the order, then even if he dies, he will pull the two of them back. 2 armies, 400,000 people, and one of them is an elite guard army. No matter how strong the Germans are, they will definitely have no problem holding Warsaw. General Ivan Zelensky said. Yes, General. The Germans' combat effectiveness is indeed very strong, but the 2nd Guards Army is also well equipped and brave in combat. Even in field battles, it cannot beat the Germans. But if it is defensive, it is enough to knock Warsaw. The operation has become a fortress. Even the tank troops of the Germans can't even think about defeating us. General Samsonov, commander of the Russian 2nd Army, said. After the 2nd Army was encircled and wiped out, General Samsonov, the commander, had better luck and escaped successfully. However, after fleeing back to Warsaw, he almost became a polished commander. However, he has a close relationship with Admiral Ivan Zelensky, so he still has a place in the Northwest Front Army Command. Of course, the reason why Tsar Nicholas II did not deal with him was because he was in a desperate situation and did not betray the Russian Empire. Unlike Admiral Leinenkamp, he immediately surrendered to Germany. In comparison, he's pretty good. Therefore, Nicholas II let him go. Of course, this is just letting them go temporarily. If the Russian army fails miserably in the Kingdom of Poland, the angry Tsar Nicholas II will definitely send them all to the gallows. Tsar Nicholas II never showed mercy to those losers. Chapter 270, Primary Target. Bialystok, the headquarters of the 2nd Russian Guards Army. The commander, Admiral Krapovich, is furious. Damn it. Bastard. Zelensky, how shameless is he? He actually wants to blame me for the defeat. It's so shameless. Admiral Krapovich cursed. General Krapovich is also a heavyweight in the Russian army. In the Guards system, he is second only to Marshal Mirilev. Although Admiral Ivan Zelensky's qualifications are a little higher than his, he must not be framed in this way. General, what should we do now? Should we continue to maintain the current marching speed? A lieutenant general asked. Admiral Krapovich had a dark face and said nothing. He and Admiral Letsky slowed down their march to Warsaw, although they felt the threat from the Germans. But at the same time, there are also some dissatisfaction with Admiral Ivan Zelensky. They believed that, since Admiral Ivan Zelensky suffered a disastrous defeat in East Prussia, he should step down from his current position. In this case, they will not have the opportunity to serve as the commander of the front army. In the Russian army, if you want to be promoted to marshal, it is undoubtedly the best way to get promoted from the position of commander of the front army. Therefore, Admiral Krapovich and Admiral Letsky deliberately slowed down, wanting to wait until Warsaw fell before launching an offensive to retake Warsaw. In this case, they have an explanation to Tsar Nicholas II, and they can even be rewarded. At the same time, he can get rid of Admiral Ivan Zelensky, which can be said to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But I didn't expect that Admiral Ivan Zelensky would be such a shameless person that he would report to Nicholas II. Once the noise reached the ears of Nicholas II, it would be impossible to contain the fire with paper. At that time, if Nicholas II blamed it, they would all be unable to eat and walk around. General Jelinsky will not really report to His Majesty the Tsar, will he? Some generals were worried. Everyone knows that Nicholas II was very upset because of the previous fiasco. If something like this happens again, it will definitely anger Nicholas II. Such consequences are quite serious. Send a telegram to General Letsky. He must have received a warning from that Jelinsky guy. Ask him what he plans to do. Admiral Krapovich ordered. Yes, General. The adjutant immediately sent a telegram. Lublin, General Letsky, commander of the Russian 9th Army, also received a warning from General Jelinsky. This also made Admiral Letsky very angry. However, in the face of Jelinsky's warning, he, like Admiral Krapovich, had no way to counter it. As a result, Admiral Letsky and Admiral Krapovich had to lead the troops to speed up and rush to Warsaw. And this happened to fall into the trap of the German army. The troops of the 8th Army of the German army have already been prepared, waiting for these reinforcements from the Russian army. General Letsky, commander of the 9th Army of the Russian army, and General Krapovich, commander of the 2nd Guards Army, did not relax their vigilance against the German army. They are well aware of the strength of the German army. The German army did not attack Warsaw, which was empty of troops, and it was obvious that they were eyeing these two support troops. Sechenov, the headquarters of the German 8th Army. The information obtained by the reconnaissance planes and intelligence personnel is all summarized here, which allows the commanders of the 8th Army to be well aware of the movements of the Russian army. Your Highness, the 9th Army of the Russian army and the 2nd Guards Army have both accelerated their marching speed. It seems that we are pretending to attack Warsaw, which scared Ivan Jelinsky enough. He had to force Letsky and Krapovich to speed up. Admiral Hindenburg smiled. In his eyes, the two Russian armies are just fat meat sent to their mouths. As long as the 8th Army launches an attack, they will definitely be able to eat them. Well, it seems that Ivan Jelinsky was frightened by us. He was afraid that we would really attack Warsaw, so he ordered the troops back to help. Qin Tian nodded. Many times, internal strife within the enemy is far easier to succeed than their own hands. Your Highness, after the Russian army speeds up, the 9th Russian army and the 2nd Guards Army will arrive in Warsaw within 4 to 5 days. When will we attack, and which Russian army will we attack? Ludendorff said. The Major General asked for instructions. What about the staff's opinion? Qin Tian asked. On these tactical issues, Qin Tian never makes decisions on his own, and he will listen more to the opinions of those professionals. After all, they are the professionals, and there will be less chance of problems. Unlike him, he just became a monk halfway and understood some theoretical things. At most, he uses his foresight skills to put forward constructive suggestions in some general directions. Your Highness, judging from the distance, the 9th Army of the Russian army will arrive in Warsaw about a day before the 2nd Guards Army. However, the 2nd Guards Army is closer to our main force. Therefore, the opinion of the staff is 2 days later, we will attack the 2nd Guards Army. According to the marching speed of the Russian army, the 2nd Guards Army will arrive in Ostrau in 2 days. The 8th Armored Division and the 11th Army can attack the Russian Guards there. The 2nd Army launched an attack. With the strength of the 8th Armored Division, it would not be a big problem to defeat the 2nd Russian Guards Front Army. The 17th Army was responsible for outflanking the rear of the 2nd Russian Guards Army and expanding the as a result of the battle. It is best to be able to eliminate all of the Russian 2nd Guards Army. As for the 20th Army, it will be responsible for guarding Warsaw and the Russian 9th Army. If the Russian 9th Army wants to reinforce the 2nd Guards Army, the 20th Army is responsible for intercepting them. Brigadier General Hoffman explained the battle plan formulated by the staff. Qin Tian had no objection to this plan. The 8th Armored Division has now become the ace unit of the 8th Army. It is precisely because of the strong combat effectiveness of the 8th Armored Division that the German 8th Army dared to attack the superior Russian army with a small number of troops. The 2nd Guards Army of the Russian army is their elite unit. Can our 2 armies and 1 armored division eat them? Qin Tian asked. Your Highness, there may be some difficulty. However, the difficulty will not be too great. Major General Ludendorff said firmly. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. we cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 271. Stand by and wait for help. On September 11th, the Second Russian Guards Army arrived in Rust Row. At the same time, the German 8th Army had already arrived at the scheduled attack position. The 11th Army appeared to the west of Rust Row, and the 8th Armored Division also set up a formation in front of the Russian 2nd Guards Army. The 2nd Russian Guards Army, as soon as they arrived in Rust Row, they found something was wrong. This situation was immediately reported to General Krapovich, commander of the 2nd Russian Guards Army. General, a large number of Germans have been found in Rust Row. They are in front of us. A general reported to Admiral Krapovich. His face was full of horror. Along the way, no German troops were encountered. And now that the German army has appeared in front of them, what this means will undoubtedly be very clear. Damn. Are the Germans going to target us? Admiral Krapovich thought of this almost immediately. No wonder the Germans have been silent before, so they are here waiting for them. General Krapovich has long known that the Germans are not so easy to deal with. So after entering the territory of the Kingdom of Poland, we have always been cautious. But unexpectedly, that idiot Ivan Jelinsky actually forced him to rush to Warsaw. Well now, it finally hit the muzzle of the Germans. General Krapovich has no doubt that the German army is ready for all battles, just waiting for them to hit it by themselves. General, what should we do now? Should we retreat immediately? A general suggested. After all, according to the information they learned, the combat effectiveness of the German army is very strong. Although the 2nd Guards Army has more than 200,000 elite troops. But if you fight against the German army, I'm afraid it is very difficult to have a chance of winning. Retreat. How is that possible? We are the most elite troops of the Russian Imperial Army. If we retreat like this, His Majesty the Tsar will not spare us. What's more, Ivan Jelinsky, I'm afraid that he has been waiting for such a long time ago. This is my chance. Another general retorted. Admiral Krapovich nodded. Indeed, he couldn't just retreat like this. Admiral Ivan Jelinsky has long been eager to put the **** bowl on their heads. If they retreat now, it is undoubtedly that they have taken the initiative to hand over the handle to Ivan Jelinsky. Admiral Krapovich could even predict that Ivan Jelinsky would shout excitedly and then complain to Tsar Nicholas II that the fall of Warsaw and even the whole of Poland was entirely because of the Guards, the reason why the 2nd Army did not cooperate. At that time, General Krapovich may not be able to eat and walk away. He would never do such a thing. General, I'm afraid we can't retreat, even if we want to retreat now. A German army has appeared to the east of us. A colonel officer reported to General Krapovich. Hiss. Immediately, all the Russian generals couldn't help but gasped. Because they discovered that the tactics of the German army were all about eating up the entire 2nd Russian Guards Army. Their group army has more than 200,000 people. No matter how powerful the German army is, it is impossible to easily eat them, right? What's more, there is also the 9th Russian army, which is close at hand. Damn Germans, are they too arrogant? Can they still resist the attack of the 9th Army while eating us? Aren't they afraid of being attacked by the enemy? A Russian general cursed. The Germans may have really planned that. Don't forget, the Northwest Front Army failed in East Prussia in this way. While encircling and annihilating the 2nd Army, they also contained the 1st Army. HMPH. This time is different. Our 2nd Guards Army is an elite force. In addition, the distance between us and the 9th Army is not far. If the 9th Army comes to rescue us, it will only take 2 days, it will be there. The generals of the 2nd Russian Guards Army were arguing together. However, Admiral Krapovich's face was gloomy and scary. Okay, everyone, stop arguing. Order the troops, set up defenses on the spot, strengthen the defense as much as possible, and prepare for a hard fight with the Germans. In addition, send a telegram to the 9th Army and tell General Risky that we may fall behind. I fell into the trap of the Germans. Now, the 2nd Guards Army is about to be besieged by the Germans, and I ask him to rescue us with all my strength. Otherwise, the 2nd Guards Army will be in danger. If we are eaten by the Germans, The 9th Army will definitely not be able to withstand the German attack, General Krapovich said. In order to prevent the 9th Army from being helpless, General Krapovich made it clear that, if the 2nd Guards Army is destroyed, the 9th Army will not end well. Although, General Krapovich and General Letsky had previously targeted General Ivan-Zelinsky. However, he couldn't guarantee that General Retsky would not just die. Yes, General. The staff officer immediately went to send a telegram. Under the threat of the German army, the entire Russian Guards Second Army immediately acted. Under the urging of the officers, a large number of Russian soldiers began to dig trenches and build defensive positions. Because there is a plain nearby, it basically belongs to the area, where there is no danger to defend. Therefore, the Russian army can only strengthen its defense by digging trenches. As for whether they can withstand the German attack, they can only pray to God. After the 9th Army of the Russian army learned of what happened to the 2nd Guards Army, it immediately stopped its operations. Admiral Letsky even sent troops to search the nearby area to prevent them from falling into the trap of the German army. Fortunately, there were no German troops around them, which made Admiral Retsky heave a sigh of relief. Of course, Admiral Letsky can also be sure that, if the Russian 9th Army is going to rescue the 2nd Guards Army, it will inevitably be blocked by the German army. There is hardly any doubt about it. Since the German army intends to attack the 2nd Guards Army, it will definitely do its best to achieve this goal. For the Russian 9th Army, it must have been prepared for a long time. However, Admiral Letsky, it is obviously impossible not to rescue the 2nd Guards Army. As Admiral Krapovich said, once the 2nd Guards Army had been eaten, it was their turn. Admiral Letsky has no confidence, and he defeated the German army only with the 9th Army. Chapter 272, The attack begins. General, do we really want to go north to rescue the 2nd Guards Army? A general asked. Does it need to be said? Relying on our strength alone, we will definitely not be the opponents of the Germans. The lessons learned by the 1st Army and the 2nd Army are already in front of our eyes. Admiral Letsky said, but, General, I'm worried that, even if we go to rescue the 2nd Guards Army, it won't have much effect. When the Germans wiped out the 2nd Army, they also sent troops to contain the 1st Army. I can for sure, once we go north, we will definitely encounter the German troops, the general said. Admiral Letsky nodded. Of course he knew this too. No, but we have no other choice. The 2nd Guards Army must be rescued. If we don't rescue them, they will be finished. Without the assistance of the 2nd Guards Army, we are in the Kingdom of Poland. Don't even think about resisting the Germans. Admiral Letsky looked a little helpless. General, we can retreat back to Russia. Unless it is absolutely necessary, we must not withdraw to Russia. Otherwise, His Majesty the Tsar will not let us go. What's more, although the German army is very strong, we are not without a chance. The 2nd Army is only less than 2 days away. If we can break through the German blockade, arrive in time, and join the 2nd Guards Army, with our huge force of nearly 400,000 people, the Germans will eat us. It's not that easy. When the follow-up reinforcement arrive, we will be able to completely gain the upper hand on the Polish battlefield. By then, we will definitely be able to defeat the Germans. Admiral Letsky said. General Letsky knew very well that the German army's combat effectiveness was very strong. If it was under the same strength, Russia would never be an opponent of Germany. But now, the main force of the German army is on the Western Front, fighting against the British and French forces on the front of the Marne River. On the entire Eastern Front, the German army only had 1 legion, 200,000 people. And Russia's military strength, as long as the mobilization is complete, will number in the millions. The millions of Russian troops, no matter how poorly they are enough to crush-equip the 200,000 German troops. Although, Admiral Letsky also knew that this might be very difficult. However, he also knew that this was the only thing he could do. Send a telegram to General Krapovich and tell him that we will do our best to rescue them. But, please insist on it. Otherwise, no one will be able to save them. Admiral Retsky said. Yes, General. The adjutant immediately sent a telegram. The 9th Army of the Russian army stopped marching towards Warsaw, but turned a corner and began to march towards the city, preparing to go to reinforce the Second Guards Army, which was surrounded by the German army. As for General Ivan Jelinski's order to rush to Warsaw, no one has followed it. After all, in the case that the Second Guards Army may be eaten, unless the head is kicked by a donkey. Otherwise, Admiral Letsky would not be so foolish as to go to Warsaw. Admiral Letsky's decision relieved Admiral Krapovich and the Second Guards Army, who were in crisis. What they were most afraid of was that Admiral Letsky would choose not to save him. In that case, they may have to fight to the death. Fortunately, Admiral Letsky did not do that. Everyone, General Letsky has led the 9th Army to the north. Therefore, we are not fighting alone. Soon, our reinforcement will arrive. By then, we will not only be able to safely survive this crisis, and even be able to fight back against the Germans. Therefore, before the arrival of the 9th Army, I hope that you can lead the troops, hold your own defense lines, and resist the German attack. In this case, it is not only to save the current unfavorable situation. At the same time, you are saving yourselves. General Krapovich said. Yes, General. The generals all replied in unison. The rescue of the 9th Army made the generals of the 2nd Russian Guards Army also see a glimmer of hope, which also re-inspired their fighting spirit. Of course, having confidence is a good thing. However, it is not so easy to resist the German attack. Soon, after the German attack, these Russians will know that, even if they muster their courage, they may not be able to resist the German attack. At that time, there will be a huge contrast, making them more likely to collapse. The 8th Army of the German Army did not give the 2nd Army of the Russian Guards much preparation time. At 9 o'clock that morning, after confirming that the 2nd Russian Guards Army had fallen into their well-prepared encirclement, the 11th Army of the German 8th Army and the 8th Armored Division were ready to launch an attack. Fire! Following the order of the artillery commander, the artillery regiments and artillery battalions of the infantry divisions under the 11th Army of the 8th Army of the German Army began to fire violently on the Russian defense line. The 4 infantry divisions under the 11th Army are all equipped with a large number of artillery 150mm heavy howitzers, 105mm light howitzers and 75mm field guns, a huge in number. Far more than the 48 76.2mm field guns of an infantry division of the Russian army. Although the role of artillery is becoming more and more important in army operations. But because of cost, economic and military constraints, not all countries are willing to equip their troops with so many artillery pieces. There are only a few countries that are willing to spend such a large amount of capital. Even so, Qin Tian still thinks that the German artillery is not strong. If the German army can be further restructured, the corps unit will be abolished, and the infantry divisions will be directly under the corps group army. In this case, Qin intends to add another heavy artillery brigade under the group army, equipped with 210mm howitzers. Of course, this requires further improvement of technology and the development of a self-propelled howitzer. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for the heavy 210mm cannon to be towered by trucks or horses. Boom. 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 The cannons of each the door began to roar, and the shells were smashed one by one towards the position of the Russian 2nd Guards Army. Groups of fireballs rose above the Russian army's position, filling the air with gunpowder smoke. On the position of the Russian army, there was a piece of flying sand and rocks. Every shell exploded, leaving huge craters on the Russian army's position. Many Russian soldiers were killed by German shelling. Chapter 273, The Rumble of the Guns. The 2nd Russian Guards Army didn't have much time to build a position at all, so it could only build a simple position. Coupled with the level of the Russian army's construction of fortifications, it is not very good. This makes it even more impossible to expect how strong their fortifications are. Boom. A 155mm artillery shell fell into the trench of the Russian army. The trench, which was less than 1 meter deep, was directly bombed and collapsed a large part. Many of the Russian soldiers lying in the trenches were killed on the spot. Their limbs and arms were broken, and they were flying everywhere. Andrei and the others died so badly. How could the German shelling be so terrifying? A Russian soldier looked terrified. If you don't want to die, hurry up and pray to God. Those Germans are actually equipped with large caliber heavy artillery. This time, we are in big trouble. An officer reprimanded His face was full of worry. Obviously, it was worried that the Russian army would suffer great losses under the shelling of the German army's large caliber heavy artillery. In this case, it may be even more difficult for them to resist the German attack. Boom. A field artillery shell hit a machine gun fortress of the Russian army. The machine gun fortress with civil structure was blown to pieces in an instant. Machine gun parts are scattered all over the place. Under the fierce artillery fire from the German army, the positions of the Russian army were bombed into a mess. There are destroyed fortifications everywhere. Countless Russian soldiers were killed in the shelling and lost their lives. The rest of the Russian army could only flee under the heavy shelling of the German army, or lie in the trenches, praying to God, and praying that the shells would not fall on their heads. Otherwise, it would be dead. General, the German attack has begun. They have concentrated hundreds of cannons and bombarded our defenses fiercely. Among them, there are many large caliber heavy artillery. The soldiers on the front line suffered heavy losses. Fortifications we built were also destroyed. A lot. The situation on the entire front line is very pessimistic. A lieutenant general reported to General Krapovich. Admiral Krapovich nodded. He naturally knew that once the German army launched an attack, it would be earth-shattering. Order the troops on the front line to hold on. In addition, let our artillery counterattack immediately to reduce the pressure on the front line. Admiral Krapovich ordered. Yes, General. However, our cannons are all 76.2mm field guns, and I'm afraid they cannot defeat the Germans' large caliber heavy artillery. The general was a little worried. The difference in artillery strength between the two sides is really too big. Yes, General. If we launch an artillery attack, it will inevitably cause the German artillery to suppress our artillery. It is difficult for us to resist them. Another general also said, if the artillery doesn't fight back, the German artillery will soon cause heavy losses to our frontline troops. At that time, once the front line is broken through, it may be difficult for us to resist the German attack. Krapowie Admiral Key was worried. Although the 9th Army is only 2 days away from them, General Krapovich also has some doubts about whether he can last for 2 days. What's more, he believed that the German army would definitely stop the 9th Army. Therefore, the Russian Guard's 2nd Army may need to persist for more time. This is undoubtedly a great test for them. Yes, General. The generals didn't insist anymore. The artillery fire of the German army was very violent. For this attack, they have been preparing for several days. A large amount of ammunition shipped from East Prussia made the artillery not have to worry about whether there would be a shortage of ammunition when shelling. Fire. 20 minutes after the German shelling began, the Russian artillery also launched a counterattack. More than 276.2mm field guns were also pushed to the front line in an attempt to suppress the German artillery positions. Although, the Russian 2nd Guards Army has 10 infantry divisions and 4 cavalry divisions, with nearly 500 cannons. However, these cannons are almost all 76.2mm field guns. There are very few cannons with a caliber of more than 100mm. This is still known as the Guards of the Russian Army's elite troops. If it is other troops, then naturally it can be imagined. Even an infantry division cannot be fully equipped with 48 76.2mm field guns. The 76.2mm field gun of the Russian army is not only far inferior to the 75mm field gun of the German army in terms of rate of fire, but also in power and range. As for the comparison with the large caliber heavy artillery of the German army, it is even more incomparable. As soon as the German artillery fired, it attracted the attention of the German artillery. Those 150mm heavy howitzers and 105mm light howitzers, under the guidance of the artillery observation balloons, adjusted their shooting element to suppress the Russian artillery. In just 20 minutes, the Russian artillery had to withdraw from the battle due to heavy losses. On the other hand, the German artillery lost very little. After suppressing the Russian artillery, the German artillery continued to fire on the Russian frontier positions, repeatedly bombarding the Russian positions with powerful firepower, just like plowing the Russian positions with an iron plow. The defensive positions built by the Russian army were blown into a mess and destroyed a lot under the heavy shelling of the German army. The Russian soldiers stationed on the front line suffered heavy casualties. Remnants of limbs and broken arms are everywhere in the entire position. The entire position seemed to be a sure hell. On the German position, Lieutenant General Francois, commander of the 11th Army, and Colonel Guderian, acting commander of the 8th Armored Division, were all waiting for the results of the artillery shelling. Report. Artillery report. The Russian army's position has been basically destroyed. A staff officer reported. Very well, Colonel Guderian, it's up to you next. Lieutenant General Francois said. Yes, General. Colonel Guderian nodded. In the previous Battle of East Prussia, the 8th Armored Division can be said to have made great achievements, which also made him, and Rommel, highly praised. Qin Tian has already assured them that after the Polish campaign is over, they will be promoted again. Guderian will be promoted to Brigadier General, and the word agent will be removed to become the official commander of the 8th Armored Division. And Rommel will also be promoted from Lieutenant Colonel to Colonel, and will still serve as the Deputy Commander of the 8th Armored Division, and concurrently as the head of the 1st Regiment. This made Guderian even more looking forward to the next battle. The German firepower preparation lasted for an hour. Subsequently, artillery fire began to extend to the deep positions of the Russian army. The 8th Armored Division, which had been prepared for a long time, started the attack again. Chapter 274, Armored Assault. Order the regiments to launch an attack in 5 minutes. Colonel Guderian gave the order. The powerful assault capability of the armored forces has been fully demonstrated in the 2 battles in East Prussia. Although, due to the low reliability of the current tanks, almost half of the tanks will lie down after a battle, and even be lost due to malfunctions. But even so, Qin Tian and the generals of the 8th Army still attached great importance to the armored troops. Qin Tian even ordered more tanks to be dispatched from the German Arms Company to East Prussia. Once the tanks on the front line are lost, replenish them immediately. This allows the combat effectiveness of the 8th Armored Division to remain at its peak. During the Polish campaign, Qin Tian and others also had high hopes. The 8th Armored Division can be reused, which makes Guderian and others very excited, because it means that their value has been reflected. What's more, Qin Tian had promised that after the victory of the Polish War, they would be promoted again. A soldier who does not want to be a general is not a good soldier. Especially Guderian, who has been promoted to the rank of colonel, and is only one step away from the general, has an incomparable desire to become a general. 5 minutes passed quickly. The regiments of the 8th Armored Division immediately launched an attack according to the predetermined combat plan. The fully staffed 8th Armored Division has more than 16,000 people, and is equipped with more than 250 tanks. There is no doubt that this is an extremely powerful armored assault force. Although, the tanks they use are still very crude, with weak armor, slow speed, weak firepower, insufficient reliability and so on. However, in this era, this is still unstoppable. Attack. When the commanders of the 8th Armored Division issued the order, the tanks that had already been launched rushed out of the position immediately. Boom. The engine of the tank began to neigh, driving the tank vigorously and heading towards the Russian army's position. More than 200 tanks, with the regiment as the unit, formed 3 arrows and charged towards the position of the Russian Guard's 2nd Army. These pitch black tanks are shining with icy steel edges. After seeing them, people can feel a coldness penetrating to the bone marrow from their hearts. 3 infantry regiments of an infantry division followed behind the 8th Armored Division. After the 8th Armored Division breaks through the Russian defense line, they will launch an attack along the gap, so that they can expand the results of the battle and defeat the Russian army in one fell swoop. The follow-up troops will follow behind them, and launch an attack until the 2nd Russian Guards Armored Division is completely defeated, and eat them as much as possible. Got what the asterisk is that? On the position of the 2nd Guards Armored Division of the Russian army, a soldier looked at the tank rushing towards their position and exclaimed. When the German artillery fire began to extend backwards, the Russian army knew that the German attack was about to begin. So a large number of troops entered the position, ready to resist the German attack. Although, their positions are already quite dilapidated. But it is better to have a place to hide than to be exposed to the wilderness without any shelter. However, these Russian troops were shocked by the German armored forces. This is completely different from what they imagined. In their impression, what they have to face should be the attack of a large number of German troops. But what about those black lacquered iron bumps? Damn it, is this the tank unit that defeated the Second Army and forced the First Army to surrender? A Russian general exclaimed. The Russian Second Army and First Army were nearly wiped out in East Prussia, and the culprit was undoubtedly the German armored forces. Although, the middle and lower level officers and ordinary soldiers of the Russian army may not know this. However, those senior officers and generals undoubtedly knew this. Therefore, after discovering that the German armored forces had launched an attack, many Russian troops came with some trepidation in their hearts. Fire quickly to prevent the German tank troops from approaching our position, the Russian general ordered. However, the artillery of the Russian army was almost destroyed in the previous battle. They simply didn't have much artillery to launch a bombardment, let alone stop the attack of the German 8th Panzer Division. Boom. Boom. The tanks of the 8th Armored Division of the German army, while marching, fired at the Russian positions with tank guns, clearing those targets that survived the fierce shelling and threatened the infantry. Boom. A 37mm tank gun shell accurately hit a fire point of the Russian army's machine gun and destroyed the fire point of the machine gun. Both the heavy machine gun and the machine gunner were torn to pieces in the explosion. The firepower points of the Russian army were named one after another under the precise strike of the tanks of the 8th Armored Division. This makes the defensive power of the broken line of defense of the Russian army being further weakened. Got. Fire quickly. The mortars on the Russian defense line started shelling. However, the Russian army is not equipped with many such artillery. At the same time, the power of the mortar shells is too weak, unless it directly hits the fragile top of the tank. Otherwise, it will not be able to pose a threat to the German tanks at all. As soon as the Russian mortars fired, they were attacked by German artillery fire again. Hundreds of 75mm field guns once again covered the Russian army's position with a round of firepower. A few minutes later, the mortars of the Russian army were almost destroyed. The rest were also frightened and did not dare to continue firing. At this time, the 8th Armored Division had already advanced not far from the Russian defense line. Da-da-da. The coaxial machine gun and directional machine gun on the tank began to fire at the Russian position. The Russian soldiers hit by the dense bullets couldn't even lift their heads, let alone launch a counterattack. Of course, in the hands of these Russian soldiers, there is no powerful weapon that can deal with German tanks. Puff, puff. A few Russian soldiers whose heads popped out accidentally were hit by machine gun bullets from tanks, and their heads shattered like watermelons. Red and white, scattered everywhere. The other Russian soldiers were immediately frightened. Some timid Russian soldiers were so frightened that they wet their pants. Damn, what should we do? The Germans dispatched tank troops. How could we resist their attack? A Russian commander cursed. Why are the Germans equipped with such powerful weapons, but we haven't even developed restrained weapons? A Russian general was very speechless. Chapter 275. Destroyed. Russia is called the weakest of the great powers, not without reason. If it weren't for Russia's vast land and huge population, it would be impossible for Russia, which is poor and backward, to become a great power. Their army is poorly equipped and low in combat effectiveness, and there is a huge gap between them and other great powers. Of course, the Ula charge of the Russian army, which ignored death, still made the military forces of all countries feel tremendous pressure. In terms of scientific and technological strength, Russia is also much weaker than other powers. The most direct reflection is undoubtedly the military aspect. Russia's military technology is undoubtedly very backward among all countries. Of course, due to financial reasons, the equipment of the Russian army is also very simple, lacking artillery and automatic weapons. With the development of science and technology, the role of military superiority in warfare will become less and less obvious. In this case, it will be even more difficult for the Russian army to win this war. Da-da-da. The remaining heavy machine guns on the Russian position began to fire, and the dense bullets hit the German tanks, making a crisp sound. However, the machine gun bullets, that can break the human body into honeycombs and tear them into pieces, are not at all a threat to these iron bumps. Just a little imprint. For tanks, this can't cause substantial damage at all. So, when the soldiers of the Russian army saw that the tank was still moving forward under their fierce firepower, their eyes widened, and their faces were full of panic. Got. The German weapons, the bullets can't penetrate at all. That is not a human weapon at all. It is a weapon of the devil. The Germans and the devil are in collision. People in this era are more or less ignorant. When encountering something they cannot understand, they will think to ghosts and gods. Doing so will not only make them unable to defeat the German army, but will also make them more frightened and less motivated to continue fighting. Damn it, that's not the devil's weapon. It's a new weapon developed by the Germans. An officer cursed. PFFT. Before the officer could finish speaking, a machine gun bullet hit him in the chest. The large caliber machine gun bullets were so powerful that they directly broke his spine. Blood gushed out from the officer's mouth, and his eyes gradually lost their luster. "God! The company commander is dead." The Russian soldiers around all exclaimed. Without a leader, they seemed even more chaotic. German tanks are constantly approaching the Russian positions. At the same time, they continue to use tank guns and machine guns to fire at the positions of the Russian army, shooting and killing those Russian soldiers. Although, the Russian soldiers desperately use their weapons to counterattack the German armored forces. But for those who lack anti-tank weapons, counterattacks are futile at all, and they cannot stop the advance of the German tank troops. This also caused the morale of the Russian army to begin to decline rapidly. General Krapovich paced back and forth anxiously at the headquarters of the 2nd Russian Guards Army. He could hear the shelling on the front line clearly in the command post, which made him a little restless. Although, the 2nd Guards Army can be regarded as an elite unit of the Russian army. However, whether they can withstand the German attack, they are not sure at all. Now, Admiral Krapovich can only pray that the combat effectiveness of the 2nd Guards Army can be fully utilized, while the combat effectiveness of the German army is not as strong as the legend says. In that case, maybe they still have a chance to resist the German attack. At the same time, Admiral Krapovich also hoped that Admiral Letsky's 9th Army could arrive as soon as possible. In that case, they still have a chance. Otherwise, the situation of the 2nd Guards Army will be very dangerous. "How is the situation on the front line?" Admiral Krapovich asked. "General, the situation on the front line is very bad. The German bombardment has just ended, but they dispatched tank troops to launch an attack. Our forward positions cannot stop the German tank troops from attacking at all," a general reported. "Damn it, it's the German tank unit again. Is their tank unit really invincible like the legends say?" Admiral Krapovich frowned. "General, the examples of the 1st Army and the 2nd Army are right there. I don't think this should be a legend. We are verifying from the front line, and there should be news coming soon," the general said. Admiral Krapovich nodded. "Ask the front line, can they still hold on?" A few minutes later, the Russian Guards 2nd Army command received a reply from the front line. "It's just that the front line is asking for a retreat, or asking for more troops to be sent to them. General, the front line generals report that the attack of the German tank troops is too sharp, and the front line positions have suffered heavy losses. They are almost unable to withstand the German attack. If you can't send more reinforcement to the front, please allow them retreat," the general reported. "Bastard. The battle has just begun, and they are about to retreat. How is this possible? Tell those guys that they will never retreat without my order. As for the reinforcement, there is no one," Admiral Krapovich ordered with a dark face. Road. "Yes, General." The general can only reply to the front line like this. The front line of the Russian 2nd Guards Army is facing the onslaught of the German 8th Armored Division. Those iron bumps, ignoring the counterattack firepower of the Russian army, went directly to their position against the powerful firepower of the Russian army. Facing the invulnerable tanks of the German army, many Russian troops have been frightened, and many people even have no courage to continue fighting. The battle situation has become very unfavorable to the Russian army. A tank rushed to the position of the Russian army and began to shoot wantonly with machine guns. Intensive machine gun fire ravaged the Russian army's positions, and many Russian soldiers fell to the ground after being shot. The German tanks, like wielding the sickle of death, easily harvested life. "Go to hell, ***** German." A brave Russian soldier manipulated a heavy machine gun and frantically fired at the German tanks. As the shell casings continued to fall, there was a clanging sound. The dense bullets hit the tank's armor, making a crisp sound. However, for tanks, this can't pose the slightest threat at all. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.